Hey man.
Hello, hello.
Heyo. So
Everyone should be ready.
cool. No, I never played Starcraft 1 competitively, Lost Hatter. Played the campaigns a bunch, but that was about it. I had some very memorable Brood War games. Very memorable. The very few multiplayer games I ever played of it. So like, you're not playing properly at all, but good shit, good shit. We had some very, very fun games. I remember the noob problem of not understanding how to break through some bullshit tanks and stuff. Tanks and bunkers. My brother was just turtling up and expanding, getting all the upgrades. I was like, piece of shit, come out and fight me. So I was like, maybe I can use drop ships. I made like shuttles and started dropping zealots in his base while floating like 5k minerals and 5k gas. Do like an 8 zealot drop like a pro gamer. I was like, fuck yeah. Never seen competitive play or anything. Just like making shit up. Fun games, man. So grabbing. So are other people coming in? Do you want to take the lead on this, or do you want us to just kind of go and?
Okay, I'll be the only one for now. And let me see. No, TNT couldn't make it, so I'll be the only one throwing question at you. And the rest of the round table. So basically, I've gathered a lot of questions all across our plebs casters and the most common problem that we have during our cast, and hopefully you can give us an intel about that.
So just kind of getting as much feedback and stuff, and just kind of also us, I guess, just discussing amongst ourselves, which is something we don't do very much, if ever, and just talking about kind of, I guess, techniques and ways to cast better. And generally the idea is just to get a good old conversation going, right? And just kind of talk about improving our casting. Yeah?
Yeah, sounds awesome.
Yeah,
It's not so easy for us very social guys.
Well, we should all start with a very. I'll start with a question before you can poke some questions out. And I think you also said something like there was like a VOD of you casting. You might maybe want us to like give some feedback on, maybe towards the end or something. So maybe you can, link up that VOD in the Discord or something. But
yeah, for sure.
So I want to ask Maynard. Yeah. So continue.
Yeah, I've not set up actually a specific VOD. I just happened today to cast an ATL match, so it's just the VOD from my channel to that ATL. I'll link you.
Yeah, link it in the Discord, and we can like bring that up later, and we'll kind of watch it at the same time if we want. I'm gonna write down some random notes because I like to, whenever I'm talking to anyone about something interesting, just kind of write some notes so I think about what we're talking about in a more structured way, and I'll share that with everyone afterwards. I'll be keeping minutes. I am the clerk in the corner. I have my typewriter ready.
Oh, very good.
We're gonna start with the big bucks question. Maynard.
A forewarning to everyone out there, by the way. I've been having very big issues with Discord, so if it does crackle, please let me know and I'll stop and give it a minute, because it sometimes clears up. You know this, Big.
It sounds like silk now.
Silk.
Just silk cutting across butter. I don't know what the saying
all
is.
All of the automatic attenuation and echoes and noise cancellation and packet priority shit that was in Discord, I just disabled it all. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
And just send my voice to the other humans.
So this Twitch VOD is a VOD of grab and casting, right? And are we talking about this VOD, or are we?
That's for later.
For later? Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I reckon
I must have also muted my ears.
I reckon we start just generally talking about casting together and stuff, and then we can kind of look at that later. Or we could start with that, whatever you guys want to do.
Oh, go for it.
Do you guys want to start with like intro and talk about what this is and everything, or did you already do that?
I guess so. I mean, I'll probably chuck it on YouTube, and I assume you guys will do the same, or at least it'll be up in our Twitch VODs, something like that.
We can do like the intro and a nice YouTube clean cut and stuff.
Who wants to intro it? Do you want to intro it, Ravi?
Isn't it your video?
That doesn't. Well, I mean, we're all here. I mean, we can all do our separate. Let's all mute, be antisocial, do separate intros, and then unmute. Oh my god. No, it doesn't matter. I don't mind having awkward cuts on my YouTube, so people can figure it out. There's a title.
Hey, just like my casting.
Most of my viewers aren't 2-year-olds with their parents' iPhone just randomly mashing things on the YouTube suggested page or whatever. So I think most of them can read what the title says, and it should be all good. So Maynard, intros. You're the legend of the intros. That's what we want to start.
Okay.
How do you get so much passion into your voice? And
it's not something that I put on. I mean, I do to an extent because I could dial it down if I wanted to. But I always say to people that whenever someone says that I'm it's fake hype or whatever, or it's forced fake hype or something like that, it triggers me a little bit because it's very much not. It's the reason why I get so loud and so excited is because I already am a pretty loud and excited guy, and the atmosphere and the moment and everything, I absorb all that in and then project it. And the reason why, I mean, a lot of the reason why I can project and do project is because I was in a band for a very long time, and it wasn't one of those, quiet folk bands where you play on acoustic guitars and, tap on the top of a bucket. It was actually a extremely loud metal band where I was the front man. So
did you bite any pigeons' heads off or anything like that?
I mean, that's a little ignorant. I only bit the heads off of bats and snakes. So
okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean. No, it was more like one of those ones where there was a little bit of clean vocalage and that sort of thing, so I already knew a little bit about vocal control and pushing from your chest and that sort of thing, controlling air, that sort of thing. So being able to project and being able to maintain that level is something that I already knew before I started casting. But actually, I wish I was still in a band, because thanks to casting and doing just so many hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours of it, I feel like I'd be better now in a band if I was in one again. So just because of the vocal stuff, but it's something that you can learn and can control, but not something I would say you should fake, because I mean, if people think mine is fake, then yeah, if it's not real, don't go for it.
If you got like a naturally more, I guess, reedy voice or a thin voice or something, it's like you can bring hype and excitement in your own way, right? And that's
I mean, I imagine ZombieGrub could probably bring the roof down with that I think she's actually done a Maynard intro attempt one time. I think it might have been during a challenger or an online one. It might not have been. You wouldn't have done it for challenger. That's too big of a deal. You would have done it online one time.
Well,
you wouldn't have risked it for the biscuit at challenger.
No one's ever asked me to do a Maynard one, I don't think. But like,
no, maybe not.
When like Rifkin would try to me to play it up, he'd be like, like your tasteless announcer voice, and I was like, I don't have one. So.
Well, I mean, you've cast a grand final, and you actually are very good at projecting. Like you don't death metal growl, but you still are very good at projecting, and you can still bring excitement when it matters. So that ability is still there. I mean, I listened to you and Pig cast that grand final. In fact, Pig pretty much did what I do as far as energy and growling and projection goes when you guys did Montreal.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's like a whole issue we could actually talk about, but I don't know what we're...
Let's just...
I don't know either.
Let's talk
I'm
about it.
just flowing, man.
So,
I'm
like,
just
Maynard
flowing,
gets
yeah.
the intro, and then like everyone else is like...
this conversation's like a jazz... This is like a jazz song, this conversation. We're just improving, man. We're just rolling with it. There's no sheet music here. Yeah, we're just going for it.
No, it's a like this is a very personal issue for me. I think like on the me and Maynard are almost complete opposites for what we're known for. Like people always say that his hype is really cool and he has a really great voice and all that. And then when people talk about me, like they'll say my voice is nice enough. I mean, it's not grating to the ears, but I'm not the hype person. And if I attempted to be hype, then it would take a lot of control from me not to do the very like, oh my god, it's happening, oh my god. So I like, it's very much been a problem for me to like find that balance between not being monotone, entirely, and then not being really annoyingly like trying to make the hype when my voice just doesn't seem to naturally really fit it that well.
Yeah, I think there's like a natural range, right? And you can kind of start to move into like the different areas a little bit, but it's impossible to just kind of go from one side to another depending on what your natural voice is, right? And your natural stretch with that. Yeah, like I think it's weird, right? Because I find my casting is somewhat inconsistent, right? Due to, and that's the big thing, it used to be super inconsistent. I think the main improvement I've had is it being a lot more consistent in how I speak. And it's weird because it's different when you're at a live event, but we don't necessarily get as much kind of continued big stage live events in a row, right?
It is tough to get that kind of practice, for sure.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes years to get, say, 10, 15 events. It could take several years to get that many events behind you, unless you're Rotterdam and you do 25 events a year. It's tough. So it's interesting because it's kind of this very slow improvement process, I think, for most of us, where even though like someone like like Maynard, you came in already we're pretty good at speaking and projecting and all that, like we said, but you feel like now after doing this for, when was your first cast? Like 7 years ago on a big stage?
My first online cast, I was literally drunk, and it was like in front of half a dozen people and on Skype with a bad microphone. So I wouldn't say that like all my voice control or anything was there at all. But I definitely started to do it a little bit at IM Shanghai. Was my first international event in 2013. That was my first ever international event, and I actually didn't control very well. I think because I was so excited and so in the moment and desperately wanted to do a good job so badly, I was trying too hard, and I actually damaged my voice very badly. So on the final day, while I was trying to keep that pace, my body was not, like, especially my vocal cords were not down with it. Like I was like, it sounded like, like I was scraping sounds out of my throat because of how much damage I'd done.
That's actually something which is interesting as well, because I think like because you do such a roary, rumbly kind of hype style, that's something which can be a side effect if you go a little too hard. But I would think for most people's styles, they should never encounter that, right? If they're projecting and speaking from the diaphragm, right? Like, I don't know, ZombieGrub, Feardragon, have you guys ever had kind of your throat like that? Because I've done that to myself, just getting excited and not projecting and speaking poorly. And that's always the thing where I know I've gotten too overexcited. And usually if by the end of an event my voice is super ripped up, it usually means there's been a few casts where I've gotten a little bit overexcited, and that probably, I think, usually means the cast has been slightly lower quality from my end.
I don't usually have the issue for big events, because when it's big events I tend to eat less and drink less soda, carbonation, or anything like that. And for me, like, so everyone should not be drinking soda or anything besides like lukewarm water technically when they're casting. But additionally for me, like, it's not just spicy food, it's not just like milky food, but whenever I eat something, I have to clear my throat constantly for like an hour after.
Oh wow.
So that could be very. It does really suck. I still don't know exactly what causes it, but apparently it's like a mild form of acid reflux. I don't know, but it's like that's why I'm muting today, is that I just ate. So. But that type of stuff actually really hurts your throat. I actually took voice lessons from like an official voice coach who did a bunch of stuff, and there's a lot of things I learned, but one of them was like, you should never clear your throat. You should never do like the whole like that thing. You should only ever try and do like coughs to try and clear your throat.
Ooh,
so
really?
If I'm clearing my throat a ton, that's usually when when my voice starts to feel like it's going, which happened for like the solo casts of the qualifiers this week, for instance. And plus I don't have as good of a, I guess, like taking care of my vocal cords when I do that. So otherwise during big casts I actually never have a problem.
I actually have to eat a lot at events because I mean, similar to when you're when your body's working hard, I feel like because I put a lot of energy into it generally, and I'll very, very rarely have a very monotonous cast. At a live event, that is, but online I will occasionally. Like my body's like it's like a furnace. Like I can actually feel how hot my skin is when I'm at these events because of putting too much into it. So I have to eat a lot and drink a lot too. But I definitely don't. While I do drink sodas at home, I definitely don't drink them at events. I will only have like water, tea, and coffee in the morning. but not coffee later. Just like water and tea usually.
This is something that I don't think most commentators really follow, but I used to do debate in high school, and one of the golden rules that was always passed down at like my debate club that I still carry on is not just like not drinking soda and stuff, but actually not drinking things that have sugar in them. Because another side effect of that, so even things like orange juice and stuff I try and avoid. And the reason why is because when you drink something that has sugar, you actually, your mouth starts to salivate more. And what ends up happening is you end up having a lot of the sounds whenever you're speaking, and it just becomes more crowded in your mouth, so it becomes harder to enunciate. This is like a really small thing though. I think most people don't care too much about it, but that is just like on a related note.
Meanwhile, Rotterdam has 6 Red Bulls every hour.
Oh my god. Or freaking Jeff is just like, all right,
and Jeff's
had my
the
fun
Monster
juice.
Cans. Yeah.
It is White Monster. It's got the artificial sugar in it. It's not real
That
sugar.
is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
And it's not very carbonated either, so like amongst the terrible things you could drink, it's actually maybe not that bad.
I mean, I'm gonna have one later because the Lima League starts at 11:30 p.m. for me. So it's gonna be a long night.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, so since this is also kind of like a coaching thing we have going on, I suppose, is like we kind of briefly glossed over it because all of us know how to project, but a lot of people don't naturally use their stomach when they talk or when they talk loud. I think Feardragon can tell this story if he wants about Tasteless and his advice. Do you want to?
You can tell it.
Okay, so years ago when we were all Babby casters, this is like the first BlizzCon we went to or something like that, and we got into the after party, you know, I went up and asked Tasteless for a signature, and then Feardragon was like, hey, can you give me like advice, you know, just like really quick, you know, don't spend too much time, you know, just really quick, something that could help. And the first thing that Tasteless went to is speaking from your stomach. So he like grabbed Feardragon, like put an arm on him, and then put his hand on his stomach and was like, okay, like here's what you gotta do. And I just remember Feardragon's like face was like, he was like obviously amazed that Tasteless was touching him, but he also was trying to be like really like he wanted to know, he wanted to be educated. So it was this mix of like a giddy school child.
It was like not even just touching me. Like, I'm not gonna lie, we were both pretty drunk. So Tasteless, even his aim is like, he's like not touching like the top of my stomach, he's touching like the bottom of my stomach, and I'm like, what is going on right now? But
Yeah.
it is still, and it says something that was the first thing that he thinks of when someone asks for advice, because like that is so important for preserving your voice.
Yeah. It's also what usually gives the better quality to your voice too. Like when we talk about, there are people who can change their voice drastically, you know, some voice actors can use every single level of their voice, and it's really cool. But most of us do just stick around the same point. But the one that gives us like, you know, you'll hear it when people's voice do get a little ragged, for instance, is like suddenly they'll get maybe like a bit of a nicer sounding, deeper voice, and then it quickly falls off as they start dying. But, you know, for that period, it actually feels nicer. And a lot of that is from the bass, basically, that you have, like literally, as well as like sound bass that's coming up from your diaphragm into your voice. So when I'm not using it, it sounds really weird, and then when I am using it, I get a little deeper.
Yeah, I have a sweet spot where like after the first day of commentary, the second day after like having, you know, however many series is cast at whatever level, the next day it'll be like a few decibels lower, and it'll be really chocolatey. And I'm like, oh, this is a nice spot here. I can feel like a nice rumble whenever I speak. But then it starts to tip over to the other extreme where you're talking about, where it gets scratchy, and you start going, ugh, like voice breaks, and you know, all that sort of stuff happens.
Yeah, and that's why, like, people who balance me on broadcasts actually, I think, get annoyed with me most often. Not that I'll ever say it, but I think it's true, because my regular speaking voice is actually quite not projecting and quiet. And then they'll be like, okay, I think I have your voice correct. Okay, do an intro, and they'll be like, in the bottom left, and I'll be like, God damn it. It's very different,
Yeah,
but it's
when they go, okay, test your mic, and you're like, test.
Yeah, but it's so different, and I guess there are some people like who don't pay attention to the like the mechanics, I guess, right? Like the mechanics of voice acting. So Tasteless did at one point, I think he talked about maybe in a video or something wanting to be like on news, like a newscaster, and doing like really official, like high quality stuff. That's one of the reasons that he knew a lot about this and went directly to the whole talk about the diaphragm with Feardragon. But then you talk to someone who's like been like through, they did broadcasting in college and took, you know, actual voice lessons and whatnot, and it's just like, it's amazing what we learn to do just by watching other people for the most part, and how much casters learn on their own compared to like what they're being taught, and then finally we can actually bring it over to casting. But there's so much that people don't think of when they just open up and cast, and some people are naturally good at it, like Roddy. I don't think Roddy's thought about how he, like, his voice is, if 100%. I had to guess, like,
if
ever.
he's put any thought into like the mechanics of commentary, I'll be extremely surprised.
Yeah, he just kind of does it, and then it's you know, it's really good. So
I think even the things that we do think about, or like we had thought about at one point also, it's so important. There are going to be so many things when you're trying to commentate that you need to pay attention to. You need to be able to follow the game. You need to be able to pick up on your co-caster. You need to be thinking about the overall arching story. What's the importance of every match and everything. If you are also at the same time having to consciously think about 7 different things that you are trying to work on while trying to speak, of how to use your diaphragm, or, you know, oh, you say this word too much, you're just going to be overwhelmed. And that is a really important thing, is picking, and this is like not even a commentary specific thing. It's really important that you turn those things into just becoming natural, so that you don't have to think about them. The solution is not like, oh, write down the 25 things I need to work on. It's figure out and practice each one of these things that you need to work on until it's just built in and you're not thinking about it at all. You don't want to have to think about the problems that are coming up.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Which is tough because no one ever. There's literally no coaching that I've ever heard of or seen of exactly what to do for improving your casting. Like, Red Eye did a book about how to improve your hosting, which, you know, some of the notes were helpful, but a lot of it was just kind of like, you know, somewhat obvious, just do it better kind of things.
That sounds like Roddy advice.
Yeah, it does.
Whenever I try and talk to Roddy, whenever I try and talk to Roddy about like random casting things, it really does feel like I just get I don't know, man, you just do it. Like, you just do it and it's fine. Okay, yeah. Thanks, Roddy.
But, you know, when you don't get to be invited to every single casting event in Starcraft 2, it's really hard to just figure out how to do stuff.
Yeah, you gotta make the best of your time.
Yeah, I think in terms of what I really like the point Ravi was saying. You can't be manually, for the first time ever, going, okay, I'm here on a big stage, let's think about speaking from the diaphragm. Or it's very hard to waste mental energy on that when you're trying to follow a game of Starcraft, because Starcraft has these intense storylines all the way through the game, right? And part of our job, and one of the hardest things to do, is to tell that story and keep up with when the story changes, which it does, because the players are constantly adapting and trying to counter each other and trick each other, and tell that while meshing with your co-commentator, and you need to just project and speak properly automatically. So it's something which I think casting from home helps quite a bit with, if you try to project a little bit more on that. But it is something where, you know, you can be chilling at home and you're just talking to your chat, and it doesn't feel as natural to be super projecty all the time. One thing you notice, though, with Tasteless is he has trained himself to always project, no matter where he's talking. Like, yeah. Tasteless, his entire voice has changed. And he said, you know, it's not just from... people be like, oh, it's just because he's been casting so much. It's like, well, he consciously got lessons and trained himself to speak differently. And that's something which I think I'm kind of trying to do a little bit more, is just in day-to-day conversation, project a little bit more. And I've heard of various like comedians and actors kind of getting like that, where it's just their natural state to speak very loudly. And it's kind of weird when you meet them, because they always are projecting this deep, loud voice. And it's a little bit weird for people when they first meet them, because like, oh, I've never met anyone who just talks like that all the time. But I guess it's a good habit if you're always going to be doing that. So it's just this natural, automatic thing to have that voice on all the time. And then it's the most natural thing in the world. Yeah.
It was actually a big challenge when I did the voice lessons, because, well, there's a lot of challenges, because he also kind of wanted me to act, and I was like, oh, I'm not a good actor. But yeah, he'd be like, you know, just you know, what do you, like, just do what you're doing when you're casting. Your casting's, you know, great. Like, listen to it. Just do that. And I'd be like, okay, like, and I'll do it, and he'll be like, yeah, so that's a really good quality. So, but then you kind of go back to how you usually talk, and like, what's the difference there? Like, what do you do to prepare for casting? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I just literally get in front of a computer or a stage, and then I put like a mask on that becomes a ZombieGrub mask, because otherwise I am not someone who goes up on stage and talks in front of someone. But I think that while it's great to always be able to do that naturally, like, or instinctively, I guess, right? Is to train yourself to be able to project all the time. I would never ever see myself being that type of person, because those people are always the ones that control the room as well. Like, when you walk into a hotel lobby and there's Tasteless, there's Tasteless, even if there's like 500 people. I could never see myself being like that.
That's true. Yeah, that man's got some presence. The golden voice of esports.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and our favorite comedian as well. Looking forward to. I'm just super excited. We're only about a month or so away from Katowice, so really can't wait for that event to happen. Hope that comes down.
Which who knows who's going?
Yeah,
It could not be going, guys. Like,
He could.
I'm not confirmed to be going or anything. I'm just fingers crossed, because it's the best practice for casting as well. Because when you're 6 days deep of 12-hour broadcasts, you better have managed your voice pretty well.
Hour 14.
Yeah.
Like,
the number of times I've almost died at that event, and that's the event which I know, really made me be like, oh god, I need to like speak better, because it's such an endurance. There's so many games, and you can ruin your voice. Not to mention you just lose your sanity from exhaustion.
And remember that one year where you had to do double the amount of work because I actually was sick on the last day, and you had to do like, it was the arena day, the day you want to be well for,
Actually, there's been a few
it was actually so bad that I couldn't even speak, like not even a little bit. My throat was so swollen.
This is a good story, actually, because I don't think the audience is like, Maynard's pretty passionate. You guys have never seen puppy dog sadness. Like, you've never seen like the most crushed, just sadness in the eyes.
I was almost crying in my cereal, man.
Yeah, Maynard gets dressed. He comes down to breakfast. He's like, he's barely able to walk. He just looks like utter shit. He's clearly got like full man flu in like the peak of it, where it's like just terribly diseased. And he's like, I think I might be okay. I'm just gonna, he's sitting there, and he's like, I don't think I can cast. And it's finals day, which is obviously such a huge highlight for anyone. Any event of Starcraft, finals is big. And Katowice's, Maynard's, the first huge finals you ever did was at Katowice.
First one ever, yeah, 2015, Zest versus Trap.
Oh, and I remember just feeling so bad for you because of that. I was like, man, that's terrible. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, we've got all these different events and these different things that go on. We've talked about projecting. We've talked about trying to kind of watch what you're eating and drinking. Warm water is the big one. No carbonated beverages. What about telling the story in the game and following the action? I find this is one of those things where I bounce around somewhat organically in how I do this, and I'm sometimes, I think, really good at following the story, and other times a little bit bad at it. And I guess just to kick this off, I would say the biggest thing I try to avoid is feeling like I have to tell a story at all times. Sometimes I'm not 100% sure what's going on, and if the mic kind of bounces over to me from my co-caster, I'm happy to just kind of talk about a few things that are going on and kind of figure it out verbally. And I think that's something I learned from Artosis and Roddy, especially, who, as very analytical commentators, sometimes they'll just be kind of like going, oh, he's going for a robo now and he's doing this. And they'll kind of, it's you don't need to feel like you've got to explain everything. Sometimes you're just trying to figure out, oh, this could go this way. And you're kind of just talking through the options and figuring out where it'll go. And then, there are these key points where you're like, oh, he's clearly going for this. The other players needs to scout that. And those are the points where you can start kind of telling those mini stories within a StarCraft match. But I found recently myself more comfortable to just kind of look at, oh, he's putting down this, the other player's putting down that. Let's just kind of look at what's happening and kind of figure out where we are in the game. Do you guys have any techniques?
Yeah, you guys go first.
Oh no, Zombie.
You have techniques.
I mean, in terms of story building, I definitely have it's more of a macro thing than a micro thing, if that makes sense. Like, I take a step back and I look at the series as a whole rather than the actual game. usually when I'm talking about these two players, which is what I do. When there is stuff like, a guy's dropping his robo or he's making an expansion, and you could say, hey, he's dropping his natural, he's dropping his robo. And sometimes you do have to, because there's literally nothing to talk about except for what's, because it's early game, whatever matchup, and there's not a whole lot to say. But if you do have that time to talk about, like, especially if it's a big series, you do have that time to talk about their history and what this means. I like to bring it up every now and then. And we talk about the 2015 IEM Katowice. That was the one where I Apollo was still casting, and he was helping me a ton. Like, every night we were putting a shitload of work into, pardon my goddamn French, chat, but we were putting a lot of work into building storylines and talking about series as a whole. And I think that that's really important as well. But in online tournaments where you have a bunch of randoms that haven't faced each other before and they don't really have any history, that's when you do, like you're talking about, you have to look at the game and understand the game to some level. But I am definitely that kind of guy where I am more than, like, I don't feel like I have a very strong analytical strength, especially in certain matchups. Like, for instance, PvP is a complete Rubik's Cube to me. It's a conundrum. It's like it's like a wizard box. I can't understand it. But there's other matchups like TVZ, TVT, and to a lesser extent TVP, where I feel like I could actually get analytical from time to time and feel confident. But if I'm not confident, more than happy to palm it off to the co-caster to do something with that sort of open time. I think you're absolutely right, Piggy. Like, it's completely fine to not be, like, don't be afraid to just talk about what's happening in the game rather than trying to make it something that it's not.
I like how you mentioned. Sorry, continue. I'll let you finish.
No.
Sorry.
I was just embellishing what I just said, so it was just redundant anyway.
Okay, well, I like how you mentioned Apollo there, because that's something Apollo, really pushed with me very early on as well. And, a lot of people loved Apollo as a caster, and we think about his analytical side, but it was the blend of the way he could be very excited and follow the story, but he was always good at hitting home the storyline points. And, storylines, I think it was 2015 was the year where that got absolutely murdered when I first started casting. And it was like every event we were just talking about storylines to the point where it just became a meme. Where we'd just be like, storylines, and it's like
But it was a new thing
the aliens
then.
guy.
I actually never did that. It felt like such an intuitive, smart thing to do that I really should have picked up. But honestly, before 2015, I was very much just taking it series by series and not looking at it as a whole product. But then when you did, I'm like, wow, this is so much better. And I have so much more to talk about when I have all this information in my brain.
It's because you get so deep into the scene, I think, right? It's so natural for us to know what this series means, and these players, we know them so well. So you can be casting a comeback of a Stefano, and you can just know this is a big thing. And that might show a little bit in your voice, but for the casual viewers who should always be welcomed into a broadcast, and just even the regular ones and stuff, you want to hit those storylines home, right? What it means. So to rehash that, what does this mean for the player? What is their history? Is this a comeback? Are they nearing their first championship? Has this been a build-up? Example, Raynor, up-and-coming player. He's on the cusp of greatness. He's only been blocked by Sero last year. And these things are very good during, like you said, at the start of a game, when things are a little bit quiet. You're kind of setting the stage for what this game means. But also as a series or an important game is coming to an end. Something we used to never do is that they used to just be kind of like, oh, cool, and the game's over. And the change you'll notice in the last however many years of StarCraft 2 commentary is everyone's very good at hitting home. This is a huge match for this player because they've never beaten this one before. You bring back the history, or, this is the first time in a quarterfinals. If they win this match, they'll make it through to the quarters, round of 8 for the first time. And it's interesting because you start to naturally, with practice, find those points to kind of talk about the broad picture, right? And it's especially useful when a player doesn't want to leave the game and you're halfway through going, oh my god, he's getting destroyed, and it's going on and they're not leaving the game, and you're like, we've already kind of called it. Quick, let's talk. This would be huge if you can take him out here, and you start putting it about the context, and you can fill as much time as you want with that context, so it's really useful for that.
I feel like Feardragon needs to drop his thoughts here. He hasn't dropped enough.
Right.
Yeah, we need more Ravi in here.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, I think that a lot of it, to me, it's very stylistic, right? And a good example is how ZombieGrub was talking about, like, a lot of analytical commentators, like you, Pig, were talking a lot about the flow of the game And then Maynard, even though, yes, of course, like I think both Pig and ZombieGrub do a great job of also kind of doing a little bit more of a zoom out and talking more about the tournament and stuff, doing that kind of higher level approach. Everyone has sort of their strengths and weaknesses. I think it's still good to have the ability to jump into the different aspects of like that kind of story, whether it be on the micro or the macro scale. But everyone has the different strengths. And I think it's really important for everyone to know kind of where their strengths are. And I think it's also good to just embrace them. Like for me, for example, kind of along the lines of what Pig was saying, I am not necessarily ever going to be the super analytical commentator that knows all the intricacies of what's happening in a particular match or something. I'm not going to try to be that person. If I'm casting with someone that does find those strengths in the little intricate details of what's going on in the game, and this is how it's like progressing the meta in some way because of this like different build or something, then awesome, we can leverage that. But if I'm not with someone like that, it's totally okay to just have a different style of the broadcast. I think like that's at least how I feel about it. It's totally okay to focus more on the player backstory or something, because that's what I would feel a lot more comfortable with, talking more about the person rather than just their play and what exactly it means to them to make it to this point, how it impacts their life, that kind of stuff. Because everyone finds interest in different aspects of StarCraft esports, I think. Like some people really like the stories of the people, some people really like just watching the players, or like they like particular play styles and everything. So I think it's good to recognize like people have different styles of commentary, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, it is certainly important. There's so many things that like I want to make sure I don't branch off into a million other topics, but yeah, just focus. Oh, sorry, kitten. Just focusing on the the story building, I suppose. It wasn't something that I really thought of either for a long time in that grander scale, because I wasn't casting tournaments that lasted a very long time. So much of my practice was one qualifier or weekly or something like that. Where even back in the day, the weeklies weren't even like consistently named. Like it wasn't the Elite League every weekend. It was something every other weekend. But eventually I got better at it. But for me, the first time I ever thought about story building in general, whether it was like macro or micro, was definitely the micro part, where very early on I found build orders, and it was weird to me after finding build orders and learning build orders and thinking that they were the way to victory, which I still firmly believe, but it was weird when I found a lot of people said that wasn't the case. When a lot of people were like, no, you don't need no build orders, no, knowing the specific stuff doesn't really work out. When it came to actually playing, and then when it came to casting as well, I remember talking to Chad or something like that. So not people I would respect probably, but general people, and they're like, no, like what's you don't have to know build orders. Like you can kind of just, if you see something happening, you can kind of just like go with it. What's the importance of having build orders as a caster? And I was like, that's so weird. Like I always assume that they are very important, and when I don't know a build order, it really frustrates me because there are so many, and I think that that's the natural way that you build a story in a game. So we're going like more of the micro here than what you guys are talking about. But well, yeah,
I'm a play-by-play guy, and I still think knowing build orders is important, because if you're just like, oh gee, I wonder what they're up to, when there's a crowd of 30,000 people that know, and they're wondering why are you there if you don't,
But I guess because people so often are like, how much does it really help you to be able to say that they're going for mass adepts when everyone saw what mass adepts do? I guess, right? And I'm talking about like that period of mass adepts, by the way, where like everyone was like, oh, they're mass adepts, and then they won. So there was like, if you just stuck someone in front of a computer that knew that and were like, and said, do you think they should be talking about anything more? They might say like, no, I got the gist. Their goal is to make me feel hype about it and make me question like whether or not it's gonna work. Which is, I guess, yeah, what their argument kind of was, like, does it work or doesn't it? Where I feel like the part of the builder, like, knowing builder is so important because you can start that so much earlier on. Instead of they have 20 adepts and they're running in, can he hold it? It's a nice slow progression of like, okay, this happened, this is what's going to happen. If this timing is marked off because of this other build, then suddenly it's going to be weaker, and then you get to that point where you can just nicely throw it off to your play-by-play caster, and they can hype it all the hell that they want. But yeah, there's people that actually said that it wasn't that important, and I still feel like if you ask someone who like what the best analysis casters are, they'll just give kind of like general things like, oh yeah, I like what they point out really specific things. Well, why do you like that? Well, because they know what they're talking about. Well, why does that matter? Well, I don't know. It just makes them sound really smart. Like they never seem to have a really like solid answer behind it. I'm like, well, it's because it helps build that story along, and it's really nice when you get to be able to do that from very early on instead of just suddenly, oh bam, there's 18 adepts. It's why like anytime you, and this is why I didn't want to branch off into other things too, but like paying attention to the game is so. It's like it's an obvious thing, but yet it feels at the same time undervalued as something you tell up and coming casters. But so many of the bad calls you ever heard from casters in the past, like really good casters, we all make bad calls, right? But a lot of it has to do is that we got bundled up in something else that we didn't notice something else. And the perfect example that I think I can always use is that the Protoss is going for an all-in yes or no off of 3 bases. Right? It's so easy to be talking about something else that's happening and then not notice that they don't have guys in their probes and their gases. Or that they aren't chronoing the proper things, that they aren't adding on storm or something like that. It's so easy to. So you're talking about like who the fuck cares because all of a sudden there's 18 adepts or whatever it is and you're like, oh wait, oh shit, that's happening, and you feel like an asshole. Like, I don't know if any of y'all can agree with me on that point, but I feel like an asshole when that happens because I was just so wrapped in everything else.
I feel exactly the same. Exactly the same. Where you're just like, oh god, because you're telling this different story, and then suddenly you're like, it's like what you said. It helps you tell the story when you follow what's going on and you know the build orders. Because the thing is, if you don't do that, so much can happen so quickly in StarCraft, and if you haven't set the stage, it's like you can't really catch up. You're like, well, this is important because, no, we just need to shout about things happening. And that happens to all of us, right? Because it's such a hard game. There's lots of things that go on, even today, every tournament. I'm sure that happens at least at one point, right? At least one cast for most of us. But it's this weird thing where you're just like, well, it just feels so crappy because, you're telling this different story. That happens. And I feel like it cheats the audience, the ones who aren't super high level. The high level ones are like, you idiots, why aren't you talking about this? And the ones who aren't, the majority of the audience is like, wait, so they just made those units in like one? Because it hasn't been set up. We haven't had time to talk about how they cut the economy by not having the workers in gas, and they've actually tricked their opponent with this. And it's like, what is this intensely physical, athletic, quick strategy game that's like, this mixture of intersection of sports and turn-based strategy. It becomes dumbed down to a casual viewer if you don't set the stage. It seems stupid. It's just like, like they just made some stuff and won, and like it just doesn't make sense. It's like, what, did they just click faster? What? We don't get it, right? And you can't explain that after the fact and get them to understand it the same way as if you built up to that moment. And that's kind of the roller coaster of telling the story correctly and keeping them in tune with what's happening in the game so that it all makes sense.
Yeah, it's almost like if you try to explain to someone, you tell them the story of Lord of the Rings, and you tell them halfway through the Fellowship of the Ring, and you kind of like, and then they ended up in Mordor, and he threw the ring in. But you have to understand, like, there were a lot of hardships before that. Like, you're like, okay, hold on, wait. This sounds like a really dumb story, and you're trying to explain after the fact. Like, it doesn't really have the same oomph as actually getting to be there as you watch, like, the whole Helm's Deep, Two Towers, etc. Like, you're skipping to the end and then trying to rewind. It doesn't work.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, is that you do feel like you have to put all the information at the last second and like cover kind of your tracks as well. It's like, oh, of course they weren't going to put in probes in their gases. Oh, I just didn't. Oh, they shouldn't say I didn't notice that on a main cast. Like, no, never mind. And it becomes really.
You never say
awkward.
That. You never make it blatantly obvious to the whole world. Like, you bring it up and you go, it turns out that there wasn't all in there. He really, pulled the wool over these players' eyes, got the win in the end, or went for an all in and failed. And
he hit this all in so well, even I didn't notice.
You don't say, oh, sorry, I didn't notice that, guys. You just keep going.
Yeah, but then like putting it more to coaching, and then there's even a flip side to this where there's people who are too analytical, like they Some problems are that they know one race more than the other, so there's that inherent bias because they're only telling one story, and we all have that. But like some new casters really only have that because they think, oh, I got to be analytical, so I got to say what I know. When to your guys' point about earlier about like actually you can take a step back and just look more at the macro and not just be the guy that spouts every number that they know off the top of their head. That's not what's important. But that's what I feel like when I hear new casters or just ones that haven't like evaluated, I guess, what they're talking about. They got the basic complaints of like your voice sucks and you don't know the game but never any specifics, right? And then they get past that and they still have this problem, which I feel is just they're not paying attention to the overall game, which we're all guilty of, but it feels especially guilty of when you're younger, when you're more of a newbie, because you don't know what is important to pay attention to. So you're paying attention to the wrong things in an effort to try to sound smart, or an effort to really hype things up. So it'll be like something super obvious where like 20 probes will die, but they're so focused on like the Terran's build order that they don't really consider it, and then the game's over and they're like, oh, well, yeah, and then, well, I guess those probes died earlier, so I guess that's why that happened. But that's all because the Terran did a Widow Mine drop, and I could explain that really well. Like, yeah, but it wasn't very, the story wasn't there, it wasn't very hyped, so like paying attention is this obvious thing, then it's actually very hard to do in StarCraft.
I like that way of putting it because it's so simple. Right? I love simple, complex statements like that where it's just pay attention to the game, It's like, and we've just unpacked that, and you've unpacked it so well. And it's like, yeah, there's actually a lot in there, isn't there? There's so many different things going on, and it is, you've got to pull yourself back and not tunnel vision. And I'm just, as you're talking about this, I'm having so many flashbacks of times I've done this, and I'm just going so far down the rabbit warren on one thing, and it's not even important anymore. The player's already swapped to doing something else, and it's like, oh, actually they're not doing that. Let's try and recover, and eventually you do get back in position. So this all falls under the umbrella of paying attention to the game. We've said we all think knowing builds is somewhat important, but just to touch on what Ravi was saying, looking at the context, the series as a whole rather than the individual, and Ravi was saying, well, I don't know as many build orders and as much analysis, but I'm going to bring so much context, and there's different styles, and we can all, and that's absolutely it, right? You can have two hype commentators together and people can love it. You can have two analytical, you can have a mix of this and that, and everyone's not all one thing, right? We all cross over into different regions, right? Even though we have a certain area or two that are our strongest. I think what's really cool about what Ravi was saying, what Ravi brings, and Todd does as well, is what I kind of call it as like, it's almost like you're like the locker room or the courtside commentator, in that so much about the players' backstories, right? And what's been going on. And like Todd, even when he stopped playing, he still always makes a point of going down through the player area and talking to the players a lot more than anyone else does. Except I'm sure Ravi, especially with the NA crowd.
Todd does it a lot. Every event I see him in the player pit, like chatting up with a bunch of players as well.
And
Robbie
every
also
time
only talks to North Americans.
Yeah, Ravi doesn't like those dirty EU players.
Like the European players approach me, I'm like, hey, what region are you from? Get out of my face.
Move over to Canada or the US of A, and then Ravi
Your
will start
passport better
cheering
have eagles on it, son, or you step back.
But yeah, it's so cool, isn't it, when you get these little nuggets, right? That's something which I really loved when you started casting big events, Ravi, because I was hearing all these things, and this whole NA scene came alive for me. And I was like, man, these are the guys I play against on ladder, or I've seen them come up through ladder, but I don't know as much about them. And, it would always be so much shallower. And I'd be like, oh, this is so much deeper. And it was the same thing when I first noticed Todd doing this. And I was like, oh, like every time, just watching at home and on the desk and in the cast, he's like, oh, this player was feeling really nervous about this match because of this. And it just adds something that's so damn valuable in 1v1 sport, especially, right? You might not see this as much in football or something where it's more like stats and the team as a whole. But in like tennis, this is huge, right? It's always lots of, oh, this player changed their style like this. They had this injury. They've had this issue with their play, right? So that's really exciting. And I think it's something which is underrated, and we definitely, I feel like we should always have at least one person at every event doing that, and that's why it's been pretty good recently to have you guys joining in, Feardragon, and bringing that as well as Todd.
Thank you. Yeah, on the topic of like that kind of just bring your own style and everything. This is one thing that I always like to tell people when they say they want to get into commentary and stuff. It was actually something that Day9 told me when I originally asked him for advice and stuff, because I used to literally just go up to all the commentators and be like, "Can you give me advice on commentary?"
You went from one plot to the other. You mean like Tasteless?
I mean, I actually have notepads on my phone that date back to 2012 and 2011, where I would ask all the like top commentators. I have notes from Husky. I have notes from Total Biscuit. I have notes from everybody basically. Pretty sure I even have notes from you, Maynard and Pig. But
Really?
yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I'd have to dig it. I have to dig it up on my phone. But anyways, one thing I like Dana was had basically told me was like, you know, try not to worry when you at least start off. Don't really worry, or don't even watch or think too much about other people's commentary for a bit. Get into your own groove, because it's really important you find your style. What are the things that you enjoy talking about? What are the things that get you excited about StarCraft? Because those are the things that are gonna be that genuine excitement that like Maynard was talking about earlier. It's not artificial hype or anything. It's genuine excitement. What are the things that get you excited? And really hone in on that. And that's when you can start working on that. That's when you can start studying and seeing how other people try to leverage that, or how maybe they don't leverage it, and you can find ways to improve on it and everything. Like, I think that was, at least for me, the basis of a lot of my commentary style was I realized I cared a lot about the people more so than just the game or how it was played. To me, like in my, I'm not still great at doing this. This is still something I want to work on. But to me, like every player in a sense, like brings almost like a philosophy. Their approach to the game, the way that they see the game, the way they feel the game either should be played, or the way that they want to try and play the game. And to me, that's really cool. That's what gets me excited. When I see players saying, this is how I think the game should be played, and it's combated with someone else's philosophy on how they think the game should be played, that gets me super excited. That's how I like kind of captivated or like created my entire style. So my advice is like usually to newer commentators or people coming up is find what gets you excited. If it's knowing and learning all the intricate little details you want to be able to talk about and say like, I am the guy that knows the small little thing of like when the chronoboost is used over here versus over here, this is actually like a fake out or something, like that's awesome. Go with what gets you excited, because I think everyone has something to offer.
That's awesome. Find your own
Really good
voice, right? And that's such a good point. You know, find what you excites you. And you know, it's so cool listening to you guys talk about this, because I'm thinking about how, you know, obviously I think for me it was all I wanted to, I think it's funny. I wanted ZVZ casts to not just be like, oh, the roaches are running into each other.
But that's what ZVZ was, Pig. What else are we supposed to say?
It was, but it was like the dead sound in the caster's voice when they had to cast a ZVZ in Heart of the Swarm. And
I was an offender there, man. I remember those ACLs.
I never had to cast a
double
Swarm
elim
host for a
bracket
Swarm
of just
host, man.
Zergs. Like, yeah, anyway.
Oh, it's so funny. But yeah, it's so funny because for me it was build orders and the depth of the play and those details and the things which are so easy to miss if you're not an expert. And coming straight as a pro player, I could immediately bring all the little Zerg details, and I would cast from the Zerg perspective almost all the time. And I was incredibly biased towards the Zerg players. And over time, I've evolved that, and it's still trying to bring some of that. But I have noticed that what excites me a lot is also looking at these players' stories as like, this is a section of their life where they're competing as an esports player, something they probably only ever dreamed about as kids. Some of them are still kids now these days. And yeah, and they're out there, and every match they live or die with it. And you know, you see and talk to these players, and they're so crushed afterwards, and trying to bring some of that emotional, just the absolute amount of weight that is relied on every single match for these players. And that's what excites me, and I try to bring, as well as obviously the build orders and stuff. And I think my biggest weakness, to talk about something, I think to improve at anything, you got to identify what you suck at, right? And that's the hardest thing, and that's why a lot of people like to kind of fall into arrested development with things. I know I do, if I don't constantly push myself to go and find shit that I'm doing badly. My biggest problem that I've gotten better at but still haunts me massively is meshing with co-casters. I sometimes, occasionally, will be very good at it, but I will inevitably, if anything excites me, get way too excited. I will talk way too much. I constantly have to try to rein myself in and remind myself not to. I'm sure I've occasionally said to all of you, I'm sorry after a cast. I spoke way too much. I wouldn't shut the hell up and give you space. I'm so sorry. I usually realize it afterwards these times, and I don't think it happens as much, but it's still something which I need to put a lot more focus on because it's been hanging around for so long. And that's something where it's, it's something where you've got to identify that weakness and focus on it. Same as with Starcraft. You suck against Protoss or you suck against 211 or whatever. You go do some practice. Come up with a game plan for addressing that problem, right? So I think meshing with co-casters is different with every person, and it's always going to be less of that problem if it's someone I cast with a lot. And for everyone, just in general, having a good mesh, right? The more you cast together, the more you get to know each other. But it's weird. There's different techniques, right? Let's tell a little tale very quickly to set the... Todd, if you're casting with Todd and you get to the end of a series, there's always an interesting little thing that Todd does where Todd says, I don't really feel I'm as good at shouting out like the GG, so I'll let you do it. And he'll kind of, and I really like this. We'll do hand signs a little bit sometimes, like, hey, you take it over. And you'll be like, you'll finish a thing, or you might try to do this motion where you go with your hand, like, hey, drum it up, let's get the hype going. So you're kind of encouraging people. And casting with Kalaris, we do that a lot as well. So it's kind of like an old thing we've had around. I like it, but it's just funny because you'll get to the end of a cast and the game's going, and if Todd thinks the game's ending, he'll kind of look at you and he'll point at you like, it's all yours, buddy. And then like they're not leaving the game and the game's not closing, but he'll just keep pointing at you, and then he'll start doing this and he'll say like, bring the hype, and you're 2 minutes into nonstop shouting and you're like, I don't know if I can keep going. And sometimes it results in a very weird moment.
Something and people are like, wait a second, Todd was casting.
Todd and I commentated together a lot at these IMs, and it was a problem that used to be a big issue for us. Like no one out there would, because you bring it up, we'll talk about it now, but I never really bring it up, with publicly like this. But there is like a hand wave where he's like, keep going, and I like hand signals. I'm with you there. But there was definitely an imbalance back in the day, where he would feel the game was over and just wave his hand so that you could wrap it up. But then there was the 2 minutes would go by and you're still screaming, and the player hasn't left yet, and I'm trying to throw it back, but they won't take it back. I'm like, please take it back. I need to breathe. I need to drink. I'm running out of things to say. I'm like starting. Yeah. You know how it's something I always like. So this is a good segue into something that Kalaris taught me about, actually, because he's a great play-by-play commentator. It's building up to a high level and not just exploding to a high level, which is a problem I had when I was a babby play-by-play guy. I would go from 0 to 100 sometimes, just because something would catch me by surprise, and I'd get really excited instantly and go, oh, like jump out of my seat sort of thing. But you need to build up slowly. And not only is it better for you, it comes across so much more exciting to a viewer.
Yeah, and, don't M. Night Shyamalan.
Don't M. Night Shyamalan, everyone's dead. And, Bly was dead the whole time. But
we could start doing that with the observing as well. The observer's in on it. It's like, no, don't show the cannons till they're shooting the hatchery.
Do you mean Brood War?
But it's important to communicate, right, with your co-caster, because we all develop our own thing. And I really love the sign language thing with Todd. It helped me a lot, especially in my earlier days, and with Kalaris did it as well. So it's interesting how we kind of, you develop your own thing. You don't need to do hand signs. I think, communicating openly with your caster, it's always hard because we're always like, on this stage, and we try to avoid reading Reddit or Twitter too much or anything like that, because you're always going to get someone tweeting at you like, you're an idiot, you missed the build order.
I have a rule to not read. If I'm at an event, I will not read Team Liquid or Reddit at all. I will check my Twitter, because that's, I tweet during the event and you'll check notifications. But I will never, ever, 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 ever read a Reddit thread or a Team Liquid thing, because it'll be in the back of my mind. And I've made the mistake of adjusting my cast based on feedback. And I think that you should never do that while you're at an event.
Yeah, it's not good. Like there's 2 stories, all right? So one about Home Straight Cup and one about YouTube. So first the YouTube one. Is like I went back and watched some of the Montreal VODs, and the TVT that happened where me and Roddy agreed that time wasn't going to dominate like everyone else said. the comments and like were like criticizing me, even though Roddy was agreeing with me, which is fine. That's fine. I'm okay with it. And that was really annoying. And then I watched the finals with Pig, and there was one specific comment that came up. Like that was like more of just, you know, typical YouTube, but better. And one comment was, "Wow, ZombieGrub did better in this cast than the last one. Someone must have told her in between casts that she was doing poorly." And I was like, okay, so here's some things to break down here. But like, first of all, that story was being told because no one comes up to us and tells us that we're doing something wrong. Because you know what happens when that happens? Like the next cast were like, "Yeah, I don't know. Like, yeah, Pig, like you can just, you know, like you can take it away. Like, I don't know. What's the analysis there's on?" Like, I don't know. I just, you know, maybe they're doing roaches. I don't know. Because you just like, it's not gonna make you feel
I'm
good.
too
Like,
scared. You don't want that. You don't want that negative comment again. You know.
yeah, exactly. Like it
and-
just it's not what you do, and I know like it's funny, but it's what like they do to casters, like actors as well, right? Like there's always like there's a bit of a meme that like, you know, we shouldn't be called talent, even though that's literally what they call anyone in broadcasting, and you know that there's some divas of the general esports caster world, but it's actually kind of true. But that's like, you know, you hear casters want to be criticized about the scene they just did, and it's like, you know, initially you hear that and you're like, oh, what a diva, and then it's like, well, what would happen if you were just criticized and had to go up in front of 1,000 people and say something kind of smart?
Imagine if every take was criticized by YouTube when they were trying to film a movie. Imagine that. It's like they do Star Wars Episode 9, and like they do a take, and they'll be like, "All right, let's open it to YouTube before we do our second take." Oh my god!
It'd be so bad.
Oof.
It'd be so bad. So, you know, in one way, it might. You know, I think Feardragon can talk more about the criticism that, you know, might be a topic later on, but it can be hard to get criticism between casts in case you are doing something really bad, unless you have like a really good rapport with the co-caster. But for the most part, it's something that we don't really do. I think all of us of the Starcraft 2 community know that the person is already being their worst critic anyways.
Yeah,
So we kind of trust each other to be able to criticize correcely whatever mistakes we made.
The community doesn't trust us to know that, though. The community thinks that, like, I'm using the community when I'm talking about the community. Obviously, there's a lot of smart people out there. There's a lot of great people out there. I'm talking about the ones that will give you the horrible feedback. Those people that have that thing in their brain where they don't understand that what they're doing is kind of silly. Where they honestly believe that if they say something, you will not only read it but take what they say over, you know.
Do you guys ever get? Do you ever had like an email essay about your casting, Maynard?
I've had email essays, but they've not been. I wish they were about my casting. That's all I'm going to say about those email essays.
Your haircut is wrong. Starcraft is a refined man's game.
I also wish they were about my haircut. But the so I have gotten essays in terms of like a message on Discord or Skype or something like that. You know, I actually remember way back in the day, I got one from Katz, and it was actually a really good one. But he was also someone that I knew and trusted, so I actually read it. Whereas if it was from, you know, XXX Sephiroth 69 XXX, I probably wouldn't. I'd be like, okay, this is a lot of text, and you know, I'll skim through it and go, all right, you know, I'm probably not going to take it on board. I'll probably just delete that message and go amongst my life, you know.
Yes.
I think a lot of people really neglect the fact that as a commentator, when you're speaking and when you're given the role to like lead the broadcast, that's what you're doing. You're effectively in charge of like hand-holding a lot of the viewers. Some viewers, of course, they don't need the hand-holding. They'll watch it on mute or whatever. They can just enjoy the broadcast otherwise. But for all the other people who kind of want or need the commentators to guide them through the experience, like your role is to kind of guide them. And if you're in a shitty mood, then it's like having a shitty guide. If you've ever been to like, I don't know, some Taj Mahal or something, and your guide just clearly doesn't want to be there, they hate their life or something, of course, you're also probably going to have a more miserable time. Like when you tend to enjoy yourself is when you can tell someone really, truly enjoys what they're doing. So a lot of your job as a commentator is to do emotional management control of yourself. And I think like, this is something that's really important. Why a lot of the commentators don't like to read the feedback and stuff. This is why you don't oftentimes get commentators getting direct criticism or feedback unless it's extremely necessary at these events, because if that person implodes, or if that person not even necessarily implodes and just like start dropping F-bombs or whatever on the broadcast or something, even just something where it negatively affects them or dampens the mood, then that can have a negative impact on their performance. Ultimately, like commentary and a lot of the broadcasting, it's something where you get one shot at it. Like you don't really do retakes or something on casting or commentating a game. So you need to make sure that you're in peak performance each one of those times. It's actually there's a lot of parallels in like sports psychology to similar, like trying to maintain a certain mentality, being in the right place, having your rituals to get ready, and making sure that you knock it out of the park. Because similar in sports, like you don't get a second shot. If you lose that game, you lose the game. You don't get to redo it.
That's a good point. Do you guys have any rituals, by the way? I don't think I really have any like pre-casting rituals. Other than, you know, I'm sure there's probably something that kind of developed subconsciously where you're just kind of like, okay, cool, we're casting, bam. Make sure I don't have tomato sauce down my t-shirt, and
make sure I'm not covered in food.
You know,
I've got a wing of chicken hanging off my face.
put the mic cord behind my back rather than in front of me, because you wouldn't want to look unprofessional like those NFL commentators and all that. What rituals you got, maybe?
I kind of do. So I do some vocal warm-ups, usually on my own because they sound weird. They're the ones that they harken back all the way to my band days, and I have a very weird way to warm up, which is something that ZombieGrub's voice coach would hate, because I basically growl to myself, like a really low growl that I build up slowly to just warm up my voice. Like it feels like you know how you'll stretch a muscle a bunch and then your muscle will feel warm, and then it feels like you have way more limber. Same thing with my throat. I'll warm it up that way, and then it feels way more limber, and like I won't do damage to it. It doesn't feel tight. It doesn't feel, you know, like it's about to snap. It feels very loose, very warm, and ready to go. And so that's something I do for myself. But I also have like another thing where I will never ever cast without brushing my teeth first, because I like to have a minty fresh mouth. That's right. Also, I think that's a result. It's something that's a ritual for me now, because I just it feels nice. But I think I started doing it initially because one time I was at an event, and I won't say who, but someone didn't brush their teeth one time, and they had something especially rank for lunch or whatever, and it was all over the mic, and I had to cast with that mic when we changed headsets, and all I could do was smell their stank, and I think it put like and I'm a very clean, hygienic person, and stuff like that really triggers me quite badly. So
I feel like I was there co-casting with you when you mentioned it.
Maybe. I don't remember when it happened, but I know it happened, and it was horrific. And I'm gonna make sure for the rest of my life that I'm never gonna be that guy. So, you know.
That's a cool idea. I sometimes I feel like brushing your teeth. That's actually nice. That's nice. When you're on
it
camera,
feels like
you
your
feel
mouth has
better.
got like a clean slate. It's like coming out of a shower. You feel clean. You're ready for the day. You know.
I know that there are other casters, not in Starcraft 2 that I've had the experience of. I was just on Lucky Day, I hope, for Maynard. But other esports, other casters actually spit a little when they commentate, and I have been given a headset that smelled like it was soaked in their spit.
Yum.
Yeah, because they also, like, occasionally if you're really off with the mic, someone, like a technician, will come over and like push it that way or this way, right? But generally they kind of just leave it up to you, and they maybe even like work around it if it's really close to your mouth. So some people don't have very good mic etiquette, I suppose. Oh god. It was gross. It's bringing up the smells right now.
That is something I might do at some point. I don't know if I'm aware of it, but if anyone would spit into a microphone and not know about it, it would probably be me.
No, I didn't think it was anyone StarCraft, but
okay.
As far as
I don't know if I do it. No one's ever said anything to me, but it would be me.
No, I think you're fine. But the warm up thing for me, I don't really do warm ups. I wanted to, it was so awkward. I started doing like a bunch of like really serious caster training before BlizzCon, but I didn't end up getting the job, so Ripperino. But I really want to do voice warm ups now, and the good type, not what Maynard's doing, which is like there's literal like phrases that you can use. I'd actually love to bring one up if I can find it, because they're really funny. It's like trying to sing a Mary Poppins song, so that you get your enunciation on the correct syllables and whatnot. But anyways, what I do if I get nervous though, and I guess that's like a kind of another issue is like along with this is like, you know, what do you do about nerves? And everyone has those rituals, right? Whether they're playing the game or casting the game. I've only gotten nerves like twice, but whenever I do, I usually listen to music somewhere quiet, or I draw if I have a pencil and paper. So that's the closest I've ever gotten to a ritual. Otherwise, it's just looking up stats on a Legulak most of the time.
Yeah, Legulak is your friend.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
you can focus on something else besides the, super big pressure of casting a big event.
Yeah, always find out the Legulac predictions and everything. The inference, gotta love that. I'm like, guys, I feel like it's a 63.7% chance that he's gonna win this match. I sense it. Like suspiciously, this is identical to what a Legulac predicted. Like, no, I'm a professional. I know about the game.
Nice. Feardragon, do you have any warm-ups?
Yeah, so I last year, because I got to go for like the Twitch hosting seminar thing, which is totally awesome. And even though we're talking about commentary and not hosting, there's a lot of cross-applicable stuff that was talked about there. So I got to learn a lot of like improv warm-ups and stuff. So I don't do those directly before the cast at live events, just because similar to Maynard, they are quite embarrassing to do around other people. So I'll usually do them
me,
like
me,
in my hotel room.
me.
Well, it's more like it looks pretty ridiculous.
Damn.
Yeah, a lot of it's like it kind of loosens up your mouth. It makes you feel like you can open up, I guess, and like enunciate a little bit better. And also just one of the big things for me was that I was definitely very rigid, especially like I still am, and this is something I still struggle with. Like I become very rigid, or like I guess I don't really flow super well a lot of the time. I become a little too stuck up. So I think that it is really helpful for me to just loosen up, become a little more silly, and sort of embrace being a little more silly. So that's one of the things. I also I have like an entire YouTube playlist of like 400 something videos that just get me amped. They just get me super excited. Wow, Pig, did you really write that down? I get very rigid, really. And this motherfucker, you also capitalized the F in Feardragon. I should just hang up right now.
Wow.
Jesus.
Even Blizzard got that right.
Wow, did you just capitalize?
Eventually.
I'm done. I don't even remember what I was talking about anymore. I am livid right now.
Sorry, no, but yeah, you try to just loosen yourself up essentially. Sorry, please continue. Yeah. I forgot that this would side rail you. I just wanted to give Twitch chat a bit of a giggle, and then I'm like, obviously Robbie's gonna see this as well, and I'm just gonna derail. Sorry.
It's okay. Now, the other thing I was gonna say is that I think this is something I ran into a problem, and I realized it like toward the later end of last year. Is sometimes I would get myself too amped up. I think there is a fine line you kind of have to walk, and this is the whole emotion management thing. So I would watch a bunch of these really, really hype videos that just get me super amped up. I'd be moving it with adrenaline, and then broadcast opens up for, say, something like Challenger. Camera's on me, 3, 2, 1. I have like some clever, witty thing that I'm gonna say, and I immediately just start stumbling because I'm too amped up on energy. So I think it's also good to recognize like where you're at. Sometimes your rituals.
Some weed.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I just need to. Maybe that's why we need to get Roddy there, right? Because his eyes are always red. Right?
Oh my god!
I was about to say that. I was about to say maybe you should bump some off Roddy, man. Here exactly. According to Twitch chat, he takes an ounce to every event.
Well, I actually get those comments a lot too, but it's because my eyes are so dry whenever I take shower, and I always take shower like in the morning every single day.
Cheech. No worries, Cheech.
All right.
Wait. So your eyes get dry because you have a shower? This is like one of those excuses. This is like you're like, what?
No, it's actually great. So every single day, this is like totally just diverting from any of the commentating talk, but every single day I take shower in the morning, and then I'll immediately I'll get dressed and all that stuff, and then I'll go to Starbucks to get like coffee or whatever. And every single day I'm walking through the streets, and because after I take shower and then I immediately go outside, I don't know what exactly it is. It's just super dry in San Francisco or something, but I just start tearing up. So every single day I go to Starbucks and I'm just like, I look like I've been sobbing the entire walk over. I've actually had one person who came up to me and was like, "Are you okay?"
Whoa.
Wow.
You should smile more, Feardragon.
Oh.
And you should make your bed.
A question going deep on the. Do you still watch the hype videos, Ravi? And if so, are we talking like you bring up some signature series, some videos of the players, or are we talking non-Starcraft stuff? What sort of videos will you watch?
It's both. So like one example of one of the really old ones is there's a really old highlight video for Starcraft called like Super 15, which is really awesome. I have sports anime clips that I watch sometimes. Sometimes it'll just straight up be music. It really does depend, and I think like the big thing is I do use them still. Oh yeah, you actually found it perfectly. But yeah, I do still use them. The only thing is it's about context. Like for example, if I'm gonna do the group stages of a Cheeseadelphia where it's like Neeb versus Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's like, okay, so here's a diamond or platinum guy facing off versus Neeb. Probably not helpful for me to get super amped up and rewatch a grand finals for BlizzCon or something. That's not necessary. It's all about context.
Cool. That's awesome. I like that. I just kind of because not only have we just found an awesome hype video, obviously I'm not going to show this whole thing on stream, guys, because it's review purposes. There's a fair use. But we will link that in chat and share a little bit. So we'll go back to that at some points. So that's cool. So we all have our own rituals and stuff. I don't really have any other than the Aligulac stuff. Try to think about the players. I would say, yeah. I'm trying to, yeah. I don't think there's too many other ones. Back to meshing with co-casters. Any specific details on that, guys? Do you feel like you've had any co-cast? We don't need to use names. Maybe you struggled with a certain co-caster and there's a way you overcame that, or you found ground. I guess I'll start with a very small thing. I early on made a mistake a lot of casters make, where you feel like you need to fill every bit of dead air, right? There's the other person stops talking, you've got to start talking immediately, right? If you get two rookie commentators together, sometimes there's that, because people are afraid of there being quiet. And I found myself getting a lot more comfortable with various commentators. If I was just happy, if they finished talking, if I don't have anything to say straight away, that's fine. Just leave it for a few seconds. And getting more comfortable with dead air was something which just made me more comfortable with pretty much every other commentator, It's fine if one person stops talking, we don't talk for a few seconds. And what I realized is, because I was so excited in my first casts, even like 1 second of silence felt like 10 seconds of silence, because of adrenaline and because of the nervousness and all that sort of stuff. So it was good practice to calm myself down during the cast and to not be as much of a nervous kind of adrenaline-fueled wreck who's just, I got to tell the story of the Starcraft game and I'm so passionate about it and I just got to express myself. And obviously you end up not expressing yourself well if you're in that state. So do you guys have any specific ways you overcame any hurdles with that, meshing with co-casters or just being more comfortable on broadcast?
I have a decent one. So I'll actually use names because I think it demonstrates the point better. So I definitely had some trouble initially with In Control. I don't know if anyone noticed that we were a little awkward. But I realized I thought a lot about it, and I realized a lot of it came down to actually something I was talking about before, the whole goal-oriented thing. So I came into those broadcasts with a goal, and my strengths I was very aware of, and I knew what In Control's strengths were, but I realized I wasn't really playing along with them as much, because In Control commentates very different from most other commentators. He is ready to go at it with World War II jokes and stuff on a broadcast, and I'm like, okay, this is very outside of my normal comfort zone. This is very outside of what I'm normally used to. But I realized like a lot of what I was doing was that made it more awkward was that I was so set on my goal that I wasn't really accommodating what his goals were. He brings a lot of humor to those broadcasts. And it was much more helpful for me when I realized like I need to just learn how to play along with them and then also use it as a catalyst to like bring it back and bring out my goals in maybe a different light than I originally intended.
So you changed to accommodate?
Yeah.
I think
what you're
both of us
saying? Okay.
Sounds like it.
changed a bit, but I'm more conscious of my change.
As you'd
Hmm.
expect. All right.
Yeah. It's I haven't found any way to like have like a setup, right? Of like, okay, I've never cast with this person before, so this is what I'm gonna do. I've never been able to do that. I don't know if anyone can actually, but
No, I've never done that either.
yeah, I don't think it exists, and it's so unfortunate when it happens on a big stage, because sometimes it really is just casting with them for a little while longer. But I don't know, like I can think of times where I've had troubles, but it never sets the same, like there's no consistency to it, right? Like I was afraid I would have trouble with the big league casters when I first cast Nation Wars years ago. But you know, and I did have some trouble with Todd, but he actually, I think he accommodated me more than maybe the play-by-play guys here, because he didn't see me as a play-by-play guy, so he wasn't forcing me to try and do the GGs or anything like that. But like Roddy, like I thought our analysis, you know, us being both analytical would clash, and ended up actually being just like a nice fusion of both us being really passionate about analysis, that I think we do a lot of good casts together. So, but then I'm like, I'm paired up with a hype caster, and you think that would be easy, and then suddenly, like, I don't feel like I actually am having the best time there. So I think mostly it's just has come down to casting with them more. Like, I think Wardy and I had a very awkward cast at Leipzig, due to both of us, and like we hadn't really cast, but then like months later we had this stupid, really fucking stupid Base JTV cast where we talked about rat-a-tats and all the hip shit, and now I think I casted them really well actually. So I have no idea what the secret is. I guess just like in general being able to flow, right? Especially as the casters that are coming up too. I feel like it is kind of our job to accommodate the elders, as it were. Which is why when I cast with Artosis at BlizzCon, I actually got like a couple comments saying that they're, you know, criticizing in one way or another, but they're criticizing me, and I always felt that that was unfair, because I went in there expecting to have to accommodate for Artosis. It's fucking Artosis. Like, why would he accommodate for me? And instead what happened was he accommodated for me, and I was so caught off guard, and I tried to like reposition myself in the power struggle or something, I don't know, that it just ended up not really meshing nearly as well as Roddy, like, for instance, who I thought it'd be somewhat similar, and it wasn't. So I don't know what the secret is. I think just like casting with a lot of people and being able to be the person that adapts, but at the same time not being forced into any specific role. Just because we're both analytical doesn't mean that I have to feel like I need to be play-by-play, and for anyone else as well.
I actually had a similar approach when I started casting with the bigger name casters, where I'd always be like, you know, it's like a dance. I'd be like, you lead, and I'll follow. Well, you know, I'll follow your beats. But in terms of having a good cast right out of the bat, I really think it's impossible. If you've never done it before, it might be great. It also might not be great, but there isn't really anything you can do to make it. Actually, that's not true. There probably is, but I don't know it, and I don't have it. I think that if you have, actually, something that you could do is just talk to that person a bit more. If you've never talked to them before, start a conversation before you cast. Get to know them a little bit. You know.
Yeah.
Because I think that the part of the reason we all mesh so well is that we all do know each other so well, and we've spent time with each other, and a lot of us are closer than others. But I think it's because we have a relationship there, which is, you know, I'd say like beyond acquaintance. Like, it's not. Sometimes it's friends. Sometimes it's like just slightly better than an acquaintance. But it's better than, it's like it's gonna be by default better than an acquaintance. We all know each other very, very well, and even though I've had some awkward casts with some people where I've just been like, oh, I didn't really feel good about that. Usually by the second or third time you've done one, it's much better. And just the more you cast together, the better it gets naturally over time, because you guys are just, you know, maybe you're adjusting, maybe they're adjusting, maybe you're both adjusting. It's probably the latter, you know. But for instance, I don't expect the old salts, you know, they're not actually old, but just the people that have been around since day one. I don't expect them to change to suit me. I should adapt to suit them, because they have a very set in style, and they're very much set in their ways, and that's fine, because I already, you know, I have my own style, and it doesn't need to be jeopardized to be able to make a good cast. You just have to put in the back of your brain, you're like, okay, I'm with this person, So I know that they will maybe, talk a little bit extra than the other guy will. Maybe they like to go onto like a tangents, and I know that this particular caster likes to go on tangents sometimes. So just give them a bit more space and don't jump in so quickly, so you're not talking over each other. So I know that in the back of my brain. It's like a build order,
Yeah.
I'm in this matchup, so with this person, I will give them a lot more space to finish their point, and then when I know that they finish their point, I'll start talking. That way, we're not stumbling over each other and tripping over each other. Which is like when Tasteless and I first started casting together, that was the problem that we had right at the beginning. Was we both like to talk a lot, we both like to fill silence, and we would both stumble a bit. And I think it even happened at GSL vs. the World. Even though Tasteless and I had cast together a whole bunch, it happened a little bit at our first cast together. But then by the second, I'd say it was done. Like I was just like, okay, I remember now. We give each other a bit more space, and Tasteless does the same as well.
Yeah, I think that giving space is the part which is hard to learn where the boundary is. But if you go into it, this is my first time casting with this person, right? The pros are better at it because they've done it more times over the years. Where I like how Zombie was saying, Artosis, he very much adjusts because he knows it's going to be very different to casting with his casting partner of 10 years, where they're best friends and know each other inside out, and he leaves a lot of openings. Someone like Kalaris, who very much was always like, he was like, I'm going to be the play-by-play guy, I'm going to be the host, I'm going to be the one who leads and presents and talks about the backstory and stuff, and you can be the analytical one. And like, I think Kalaris, someone coming in as an expert caster, casting with Kalaris is like the easiest thing in the world, because he's like so like in his corner. He's like, this is my side, that's your side, and he gives you so much space, and he'll ask you questions, and you'll leave him space because he's going to just play by play so well. And it's interesting because he's someone who I think has probably been the most methodical at improving over the years, and that's why he's hosting so many games, and he does desk hosting, which I think there's like a level up in hardness of jobs, and I think desk hosting is a lot harder, and I think what Smix does is impossible, and I don't know how she does that in multiple languages, and I'm like, please don't ever give me that job
either. I'm trying to look better in a pencil skirt. That's something that Smix does that I wish I could do better. Cardio, a good diet, just we'll get there eventually.
I think we're all starting to. We're
up.
looking pretty slick on broadcast lately. I think we're a pretty sly team. We've got to get a few more of those.
We found some good jackets. We found some good shirts. We're starting to really sharpen up.
Get some more band photos together. I think when all of us are together next time.
That Katowice one was legendary.
So
what was our band called again? The Waiting Room.
Yeah, the Waiting Room. That's that album name. Yeah, the album name is The Waiting Room. Oh my gosh. But yeah, back on the point there. I mean, it's interesting because giving space is so important, and I remember sinking into it very quickly with In Control, because I didn't get to cast with him until the last year ever, even though we'd been at many events together. I was like, don't put those two together for whatever reason. Probably because I was pretty terrible at rolling with other people's jokes. But yeah, I remember we sunk into a rhythm very quickly, outside of me stepping on his toes occasionally, what I was talking about before, where I dominate a broadcast sometimes a bit too much by not shutting the hell up. But I think Jeff has become incredibly good at finding the line with his humor, where if he's got to challenge a broadcast and he's got Ravi in front of him, he's just going to let all hell loose, because it isn't the big WCS event, and it's Ravi who plays off those jokes in such a funny way, and it's become this iconic duo. But otherwise at a big event, like he's a bit more kind of like, he's going to give you space and stuff, and I think everyone's become pretty good at that. I know ZombieGrub with you, I've found it really easy to kind of find, I think, where we mesh together. But it's always different every cast, right? Every event where we've all evolved a little bit, and the boundaries shift a little bit.
They do. I mean, the first time we cast, it was like literally the first time we've ever cast together was at BlizzCon, and I didn't even really know you that much either. You were kind of like around and like laughing at people's jokes and generally being a nice guy, but otherwise I didn't know much else. So
I don't think we'd really talk to each other one-on-one at all at that point. Yeah.
No. But that was actually pretty good, and we had a really high match too, which was lucky. So I wanted to cast you in Montreal, but I thought we did a really fucking good job, and I didn't expect that level at all when we first did it. But again, we got like a really good match, so that probably had something to do with it. But the In Control thing's so funny, because I think like with this conversation we can kind of figure out that there are some people who and maybe they'll disagree, maybe they'll see this VOD and get angry with us, but I think there are some people who are just like, I'm gonna do my thing, and I hope that works out. And, you know, a lot of times they're correct, right? Like, Roddy kind of meshes well with everyone, for instance, but I don't think he's ever thought about it too much. But there's other people who, like, think a lot more about how they can adjust. But the in control thing is funny because I think he does think about this, even he doesn't, like, say so publicly. But I think that I strongly feel like the producers of the show, they do have some, you know, there are sometimes reasons why they pair people up together. Sometimes you just ask what match do we want. Sometimes it's like it's a race thing, sure, but then there's in control, and I feel like very strongly that they intentionally kept them away from the newbies in the beginning of their careers. Like,
yes.
No one goes to their first premiere event and gets the cast with In Control. It's
That's
only
like
the second one.
that's a baptism of fire right there.
But,
They're like,
so
let's get the newbie to warm up first.
I had this in my mind, right? And then, like, you know, Feardragon was the one that got cast with them first, and in Challenger, and he was like saying how, like, yeah, I'm trying to adapt here, and it's been difficult. So I'm coming into this, and I'm like, okay, they're intentionally not, like, you know, giving me any casting gigs with them. This is the first time I'm gonna be casting with them is the Challenger season 3. And I was actually like, I don't know how this is gonna go, but I'm gonna try and just work with it. And what was odd is that I think prior to that cast, In Control was on the Pylon show or talking to me like in the car or something, and he was like, yeah, I'm really looking forward to casting with you. I think we work really well together. And I was like, what? Like, I was really surprised. I mean, at that point I also didn't know him very well, so I just kind of figured he just thought I was some rando, but also, like, they thought we'd work well together. And I find that I was up to the challenge almost of, like, matching his humor. Like, it was the first time that I ever saw a caster, and Artosis is like my model of caster, by the way, so he's like my senpai. But even when I cast with him, I wasn't like, okay, I need to ascend to this guy's level and, like, match him there. But for In Control, there's something about it where it was like, and maybe it's because we had watched Feardragon kind of be like, you know, right, like, bullied, right? And I was like, no, I'm not gonna be bullied. I'm gonna snap back. I'm gonna have these zingers and get them. They really, really wanted to. It ended up being a pretty good cast. It had some funny moments, but he's a personality. There's some people you don't push them aside. You accommodate for them, casting wise. I feel like he's one of them.
Mm-hmm. I would definitely never expect the fella to like when I was talking about before how there are some people that I believe would change their style a little bit to accommodate to, you know, their co-caster. Absolutely will never be that guy. But he's earned his stripes. He's very, very good at what he does, and I don't expect it. I don't expect Artosis to change. I don't expect Tasteless to change. I don't expect Roddy to change. I don't expect Jeff to change. They're just, but they're so good at they're so good and so professional at what they do. They really can carry the cast all by themselves as well. Something I noticed with Artosis when I first cast with him.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I was really nervous. It's like back in 2012. I'm like, oh, I hope I do a good job here. I've been watching you on GSL a lot for the last couple of years, and you know, it's going to be tough. I'll just do my best. And it felt like the best cast I'd ever done, and it wasn't because I did anything special. I just think it was just because he carried it really well. He just knew how to bounce off me.
Like, I kind of want to go, like, big picture, but I'm also afraid to, because we're already over, like, I think Kraven thought this was going to be an hour long. We're all like, oh, is it though? An hour long?
Is it though?
But there's so many, like, big picture things. So many things that aren't even worth, like, really coaching either. Like, for instance, how to look on camera, because no one's going to be on anything but a webcam camera and stuff like that. But I find it so fascinating to talk about. And, you know, we're all in a same Discord group, so
yeah,
I like to bring it up. But, yeah, if I'm allowed to, I'd like to...
Let's go. Let's just talk. I mean, I think we're all enjoying this. I messaged in the chat before, and Grabman was like, "This is awesome. You guys are answering my questions, and I know I'm having a good time. The audience is chilling."
Yeah,
so
we're
take
accidentally
it away.
answering all of his questions without him asking any, which is great.
Yeah. So, all right. So there's like this, and I feel like I was talking with Feardragon a lot about it last year. But there's this, like, I'll just speak to myself. But, you know, anyways, Feardragon wants to chip in. He wants, yeah, go ahead. But for myself, there's these guys in Starcraft that are actually just bigger than life, right? They're just, if they weren't quote unquote stuck in Starcraft and they had gone into talk show host or something like that, they'd all be fantastic. right? You just something about them, and those are like the big four that you usually invited to the Brood War stuff, right? Tasteless, Ortosis, In Control, and then Roddy's kind of like, you know, wiggled his way up there as well as being bigger than life, but there's definitely those three guys, and then Day 9, but you know, whether or not he cast Starcraft, and it's like so almost, it's like intimidating. There we go, intimidating at how they came to be, and a lot of that is experience and being friends with each other during their younger years and stuff. But it's like I look at them and I look how they interact and I look how they cast and I look how they just seem to do everything so well, and I'm like, and they're just really funny guys. Like, if you're thinking this is all something they only say for broadcast, you're absolutely wrong. They're just like all like that all the time.
Yeah,
and
that
I'm like,
was amazing to me.
How do I do this? Like, how do I make myself that appealing? Like, and it's actually been a struggle, you know, and like kind of contextualizing here, like for instance, breaking through to the next level of casting, you know, like there's already people that are set and there's certain reasons why they're set, but there's also people that are seem to be set so damn much because it seems like they have such a strong personality, and you sit there and you're like, how do I improve my personality? Like, fuck. Like,
that's a
can
tough
you?
one. Yeah,
It's
I don't
such
know.
a hard.
Yeah.
But it is. I think it's a legitimate thing though. Like, people are gonna be like, no, like you all bring your own flavor to the cast, and no, you're all, you know, there's analysts and like, no, you don't understand. Like, they are just. I need to read like a self-help book of like how to be funnier and like how to kind of engage with people, and I need to read them all. I need to be really good at it, and I just feel like I can't, and it's so difficult because it's such a it's a fucking concept. There's no practicing getting funnier, and a lot of times like so much of it is just innate.
I've been around you when you're really comfortable with a group of people, or drunk, or both.
Thanks.
And you actually are a really funny and very, very charming person, and that actually, you know, it actually is there. I think it's just because you've got those guys on a bit of a pedestal in your brain, right? And you believe that they are like a, you know, quote unquote better personality, but I actually don't think that's true. I don't think you need to, you know, I don't think
It's
you need
whether
to
or
be
not they're
concerned
a
about it.
better personality, I guess, is not necessarily the problem. Is that the personality that they have honed, I suppose, right, throughout just living, literally being alive, just feels like something you can't compete with unless you also get 7 years of doing StarCraft and getting to do it with your buddies, like
Also,
day.
Also, a lot of them were like that before StarCraft 2 came out because they,
Right.
you know, because it's actually even longer than that, I feel. And I was actually having this conversation yesterday about like what you know, whether a person turns. It was a weird conversation about you know, I was watching a documentary on serial killers, and trust me, this
great.
is relevant. So I was watching a documentary about serial killers, and the question came up: are people born a certain way with that sort of, you know, that trigger in their brain, or is it the result of their environment, you know?
Right.
And that's a cool conversation. So I was just talking about it a lot yesterday, and I think that it's their environment. It's, you know, it's maybe a pair of brothers growing up that you know, like the Plots, they grew up together, they're a pair of brothers, they game together all the time, and they weren't born funny. They were just very intelligent guys that were very weird, that grew up to be just insanely funny, from bouncing off each other and having friends that were like that, and just getting their sense of humor and their mannerisms from that. Same deal for me. Like, sometimes I'm funny in a cast, but a lot of the times I can be very vanilla. You know, depends on. I could have a good day, I can have a bad day. I'm not always a funny guy. I'm not always a friendly, outgoing guy either. Sometimes I'm having an emo day. I can be a little bit topsy turvy. But I'm definitely a product of my environment. Sure, I wasn't born with any specific ability. Like even my voice, people out there are like, oh, you know, you were born with this deep voice. No, I actually sounded very, very different 10 years ago. Very, very different. This is something that's happened over time, you know, from a very, very bad lifestyle. So I wouldn't suggest anyone do what I did to get the voice that I have right now.
Yeah,
You know, it wasn't on purpose, but yeah. Anyway, what I was just saying is that I'm a big believer in when people ask me, you know, how do I get like this or how do I get like that? I'm a big believer in being yourself first and then making it work from there. Build on that.
Right. Yeah. But like to scale it down a little bit, right? It's more like, to make it really simple, I suppose, you know, because I think the general advice is just to bring out the best of your personality. It's like when people ask me what they should do, I actually have said before, like, just be yourself, but like more of it, which sounds really stupid, but that's generally the best advice. But to be like, to just put a question, like pose a challenge, it's like when someone says that you're vanilla and you're boring, and you get to that point where you're like, oh, it's not just a random YouTuber, that it's actually, however you determine it's good, it's actually correct, let's say. Maybe it's just about the amount of people that say it, right? Sometimes you gotta be like, okay, maybe they're right. If the large portion of people say that, or say that you're not as interesting as the next guy, like a large portion, so they would never want you over the other guy, how do you improve on that?
Can I just try? I don't actually have an answer to that, but can I say, like, and also the whole thing of just being told, like, just try to be like a larger than life version of yourself. It feels like you're trying to tell Krillin, like, okay, DBZ, hey man, I know that all those other guys are Super Saiyan, but maybe there's a superhuman. Have you tried hard enough? Maybe you should just go superhuman instead. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm feeling like Krillin right now. I'm kind of getting left behind.
Oh, that's a good analogy. But it is it's a question, you know. It's like, well, I got a decent voice. I know something about all the races. I'm friendly enough, right? My co-cast is usually pretty good with me, and I'm just like, well, it's almost the element X that no one likes to acknowledge, because that means that it's unattainable or not something you can work on, but it does sometimes exist, and it is like, there are literally self-help books that say like how to be funny or how to be a better personality and stuff like that, and it's like I should read those maybe, because I don't know what the advice is for things when you feel like you're stuck just one step below because of X or well, the mysterious X reason, I suppose.
I think a lot of it is like, for me it's always just been getting comfortable. You know, if you're uncomfortable, your funny side or your witty side kind of just takes a back seat, because you're very frontal, you know, your very frontal lobe concentrating on what you're doing. The back, you know, the things that put the pieces together is kind of asleep because you're thinking too hard about what you're doing. And that's when you're not comfortable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's always like what I've been thinking about a lot recently is like trusting in the process, right? And I think it's undeniable what you were saying, ZombieGrub. Some people have that X factor. Some people are just, they're big personalities from their upbringing, or they have this charisma and stuff. And I like if I talk to Day 9 and have a conversation with them, I'm always left a little bit like stunned, like this guy is so larger than life, you know, in person. That's just who he is. Just the way he'll retell a simple story, you know, it's, oh, this isn't made up at all. This guy's just this huge personality. And the thing is, if you do go back and you look at these people, they have the seed of that. If we like, I was just showing, you know, some of that 2010 GSL, right? And you know, everyone, you guys as well, you all saw it, right? We're like, oh my god, Nick and Dan look so different. You know, this is 9 years ago. We were all babies back then. But you go watch their casts, you know, from 2010, and there's a huge difference. Especially like the very first season, the first rounds, they're more nervous. They're not as flowing. They had the humor, but it was nowhere near as funny as they got after doing this show for a few years, right? You know, it's
just comfort. It's being like such close friends. So that's where it all comes out.
And they'd already been casting together a bit and living in Korea together for, you know, a certain amount of time. So they knew each other well at this point. But, you know, Jenna in chat, shout out to Jenna, was saying debate teams. They were all on debate teams in school. The three big guys we're talking about, these two and In Control, you know, but since then they've cast and they've become more confident. And if you go back, we forget it because, you know, you just see the most recent evolution of them and you think, they were always like this. But I think they did evolve so much through comfort and experience, and there was little bits of working that process behind it, right? That's what we've been talking about all today, right? It's let's focus on our voice a little bit. Let's focus on this thing. And no one of those little things just makes you win the game, right? But it's let's bring it back to Starcraft 2 strategy, as we always do. It's like you get a little bit better at this thing and a little bit better at that thing, and your MMR goes up and down, and you feel like you're not improving if you don't have faith in the process, if you don't trust it. But as we've all known, whenever you've gone through an improvement streak, whether it's when you first started playing or whatever, you look back and you're like, oh, I'm actually so much further ahead than I was, you know, a year ago or however long, right? And that's so deeply ingrained in me now. So I always, whenever I'm learning a new skill, I've got to remind myself, because I inevitably get frustrated and say, I don't feel like I'm getting enough progress, right? I don't see myself getting better. And I just remind myself, well, as long as I'm focusing on one or two details of things that I think I can do better, as long as I've got my eyes open to like, what's a weakness? What's something I can improve on? But not just that, like, how can I amplify my strength? Something Ravi really hit home about today was, what do I find really good? Let's keep doing that really well, right? Let's not keep it just fixing the negatives and bringing them up to par, but let's also push out our advantage, right? That thing that makes you passionate. So, I think the important thing as well is like always to benchmark against yourself, right? Like I think looking at other people is like the aspirational goal. This is the way I look at it. I'm like, man, and I remember saying this to Dan many years ago. Tasteless will probably remember if you ask him this. I was chatting to him back in 2012 as a pro, and we were talking about, you know, trying to make it as a pro player and stuff. And I was like, yeah, you know, because we were talking about like longevity and how if I don't make it a certain amount in tournaments, I would have to retire at some point. And I was like, yeah, look, eventually down the track, I want to have your job one day. You know, I want to cast Starcraft because I just love this game and I love talking about it and I enjoy playing more, but I don't really know if I have what it takes. You know, we'll see how that goes. And that was always never me saying like I could do it as well as Dan, and I still don't. But it was kind of like, you know, let's try to be aim for that kind of being able to cast Starcraft and talk about it and everything. And as long as I kind of focus on it, I know I'm going to move in that direction and I'm going to fail upwards, to use yet another one of my thousands of self-help terms, which I spam endlessly. Nice. Fail upwards. So yeah, that's kind of my way of doing it. And I think eventually you just build on yourself.
That's, yeah, I like that whole thing. I mean, I think it is the best way to do it. I mean, it's not, it has to do with being more comfortable. It also helps, you know, that you do have years of experience to back you up. Like when people think of you, right, they're going to think of years of experience, and then subconsciously it should be that to what they think is a better cast. If you were to somehow do an even cast with two people, if I was actually casting just as well as Tasteless, people would think Tasteless casts better, like 99% of the time, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, but I think what else, like, just to make it not look like I'm just totally helpless and I have, you know, tough decisions and I'm lost in life. Like the things that I did, like, think about and learn from whenever I did look into this stuff is that, like, to be funnier, for instance, like a lot of it is so like innate and just like, if you got the social skills, you got the social skills. But it also was a lot of just like experiences make you such a better person overall. So this is going to get very self-helpy, but let's go with it. Which is the person who stays at home and literally does nothing and talks to no one is probably a very boring person. Maybe they're crazy and that's why they're interesting. They've like created a world in their mind. But it's the people that you talk to that are like, I have this story of this time I was in Sydney. I have a story of this time I was talking to this guy who was from Australia. You think Australians?
Yeah, having a full life. Honestly,
yeah, exactly.
like
having a full
comedians,
life.
comedians that are, I mean, comedians in general are actually really, really well-learned people. Like they actually are extremely well-read and they keep up to date with current events, and that's a lot of where all the material will come from. And most comedians will have jokes about hotels and about airports because they are primarily in hotels and airports. It's just the stuff that happens to them, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like drawing upon like multiple experiences are usually what makes people so entertaining to even listen to in the first place. So in Starcraft terms, right, that's like being a player, putting yourself in competitive environments even though you're never going to win type thing, which I think a lot of it's like, it's such like top tier advice, but if we're going to talk about being the best, I guess it's what we're going to do. It's like, even if you don't think you're ever going to win a tournament, you should still play in tournaments to get the feeling, you know, to remind yourself of what it was like when you were playing competitive in like high school, for instance, of soccer or something like that, to actually be able to get all these experiences together and bring it to a cast. Usually what makes really entertaining casts. But yeah, it's just, it is those X factors still where it's like, damn.
I think you've just taken this whole conversation to a beautiful place, ZombieGrub, because I love that, you know, you opened up there a little bit as well, like, because there is this we are, you know, our job is to make love to the camera and try to look good and try to hog the attention, and it's we're in competition with each other, we're measuring against each other. It's only natural, right? And there are these doubts which we've all had in our minds. So I just want to say shout out to you for actually voicing them there, because I think we can all really feel that same thing.
Oh, I'll talk about doubts all day, man. I hate myself.
Pigs like we're measuring, we feel ourselves like, what are you trying to say here?
Oh my god. This is the problem, you know, once I'm known for speaking about things in a certain way, and now everything comes out sounding a little bit, nah.
An eye for an eye. Right?
Oh, it's yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? So there's so many different kind of areas you can improve on. I think a few of the points we've covered on have ranged from the basic mechanical we've talked through, now a bunch of kind of, you know, where you measure yourself up against other people, and how we all kind of you try to bring your own X factor, your own element to it, but there's always going to be, you know, challenges and things we face in. And sometimes when you're on a roundtable discussion and you've just been talking about how sometimes, you know, you just want to fill dead air and you don't really have anything to say and you shouldn't say it, you catch yourself just kind of talking and trying to figure out what you're talking about and realize you're doing exactly what you were just talking about.
I've done that like twice in this phone call.
I've forgotten the point I was making and found my way along. There's so many things to think about when it comes to casting. It's like such a... And it's not just casting either, right? Like if this is really going to be a huge roundtable discussion, we could talk about the politics of casting in the entertainment industry, and like there's so much to be involved in behind the camera, which, you know, does at times directly affect the cast. Like, okay, so for instance, another thing to talk about is what happens when you're having a crappy day, or when you got bad news, or when you don't feel very good. Like, what do you do to bring yourself back into Starcraft? Something that can happen whether you're casting a big event or a really small one from home, because that does happen. And like, it doesn't happen that often. From like my own experience, I think it only happened once, and actually no, twice. But anyways, it's like, what do you do when you feel crappy? Like, you don't think they're handling it very well, you think you're being stupid. Like, what do you guys do to even overcome such mental doubts, I suppose, or physical doubts? Like, there could be literal limitations, right? Like the screen's too far away, and it's also like a monitor used for Smash Bros.
Oh, damn.
Just not calling anyone out or anything.
Oh, darn.
But what do you guys do when that happens?
It's too many angry memories coming up right now, where I'm just like, I am going to turn into the Hunchback of Notre Dame if I have to keep casting on this, like, this monitor inside the desk that we're in, and it's on an angle with a light reflecting on it, and it's like angled away from us. And I'm like, what is going on here? The number of events we've done that. One where I was observing at the same time back in the day. It's like, oh my God. It's really tough, isn't it? You know, I one of the funny things and one of the cool experiences that I have from doing so many esports events, and you know, WCS is great and we get good production and stuff, but the bad events is I think this is something I don't know whether it's my environment or I'm born with it. I have the ability to take a shitty scenario and just see the humor in it. Now this is not as bad as like getting terrible news, right? You know, a family member's passed away, something really that affects your career. You've just got news. I have no technique for dealing with that. I will try to shut it out, segment it away, and deal with it later. But if it's something which it's like, just like, okay, the production's crap, I basically absolve myself of part of the responsibility, because I've been on so many of these broadcasts where the producer, I can barely understand him, you know, speaking English, or I've got 3 different languages in my ear while we're trying to cast from the different production teams. And for me, it's like, okay, I'm not being given what I need to do a premiere broadcast. This is going to be like I'm streaming from my home almost. It's more fun. It's more casual. If things get unprofessional, that's where the humor is going to come from. And I immediately just find the humor in the failed production. You know, we've had like those moments even on WCS casts or DreamHacks or whatever, where like the cameras just started randomly zooming between every possible camera they have set up during like the show, and we're like, what the hell? And like flashes to like Smix asleep on the couch or something, like lying down on the couch, and then it's flashes to backstage for some reason, some guy who's got it pointed at the cameraman's feet, and it's like flashing around. All you can do when production screws up is roll with it and just have fun with it. And I find that I embrace that now. And it's funny because I do sometimes these other little shows here for like, you know, local promotions or marketing or something. Like at IEM Sydney, I did like a little go around interviewing people, and it was like live interviewing random people on convention floors. And it was like ridiculous interviews with people I'd never met who were streamers, and I didn't even know what they streamed and stuff and this sort of thing. And like, it was just funny because I was like, this is literally the worst possible like setup I could have to do a show on camera. But I've done enough crappy produced esports events like from back in the day before things got better now that I just kind of find it funny and find the humor in it. And I'm just more comfortable accepting that it's like, it's just, okay, recalibrate what I expect out of this broadcast. This is naturally going to be a little bit of a disaster. Let's make it a fun disaster. So that's something I feel a lot more comfortable with these days.
I don't know if it's a healthy thing to do, but I put I'm very much like a product of something that my father's always brought me up to be. Is like, he's always been like that sort of, you know, even if you're sick, even if you're feeling down, you've got a job to do and get on with it. You know, one of those kind of mentalities. So I've already brought that. Like one time I was doing a gig back when I was in a band, and I got told that someone in my family died like 30 seconds before I was going up on stage, or a minute or something, like really close to having to go up and do the show. And it was something where I'm like, I heard it and I couldn't even process it emotionally. I'm like, all right, compartmentalize. It's back there. I've got a job to do. I'm here now. I have to do this. Like, I have to do it. Like, in my mind, I'm just like, I have to do it. It isn't even a choice. I got to do this thing. And then I have this ability to compartmentalize very, very well. So there's been a bunch of gigs, even in casting, where I've like, you know, I've been having relationship issues, or I've been having like problems with whatever, like you know, there's been a lot of events where I've had that, but when I'm there, I'm like, okay, I'm here now, and this is where my mind is. Save that for when I'm alone. Save it for another time. I have a job to do, which is super, super easier said than done, so it doesn't feel like it's even helpful, honestly. But that's just, yeah, it's just something that's something that is an ability built over time, I suppose, to compartmentalize and focus super hard on what you have to do and get it done.
Do you have any advice for Dragon?
Yeah, for me, I think I have like a slightly different mentality. It's something that like I used to be told a lot, like when I was growing up and stuff, is like, if you're in a shitty situation, then it's good, or you're handicapped in some way in a situation that you're normally not. Like, that's a really good opportunity to learn how to perform that task at your worst. Like I used to do some like a little bit of martial arts and stuff, and we used to, like, if you, for example, if your leg's hurting or something, your right leg's hurting, it's like, okay, well, this is an opportunity for you to learn how to use your left leg better. What do you do if your right leg is like kind of gone? How do you actually handle that kind of situation? How do you fight like that? Similar, like if you have a broadcast or something and your voice is starting to go, or, you know, you had like something really shitty happen right before you, it's like, okay, if you can improve here at your worst, your best is also going to be better. You're going to become an all-around more consistent person. You're actually just going to become better at what you're doing because you can handle the worst. This is practice for you. And that's kind of like the way that I've tried to think about a lot of those situations is, my God, I'm feeling like absolute garbage today. This is going to be such good practice, because if I can do well here, I can do well anytime.
Are you familiar with Stoicism and negative visualization at all, Ravi?
I'm somewhat familiar, but like not only as the phrases. Not
well,
not
it's kind of what you're describing there is what you're that's basically so it's a Stoic sort of mental practice thing, which is basically what you're describing, where you specifically so kind of almost like a meditation type thing. Basically, you sit there and you just think about the worst possible outcomes, your fears, right? So in this case, it's like, well, what if your leg got chopped off and you only had one leg? And you don't just think about the emotional reaction to that, but you think about, okay, cool, like that would be shocking. This would be something where if it hits you and blindsides you, you know, you'd probably feel very overwhelmed, right? Or whatever the case is, something happens, whatever it is. And you really think hard about, okay, well, what's the worst case scenario? How would I deal with that? And you kind of just think through, okay, well, how would I respond to that situation? Okay, you know, I'd have to learn to use the right leg better. I would do this to compensate. I'd get a crutch or something to help walk around, yada, yada. And basically you're almost consciously giving yourself the time to think about to have that panic and have that moment of like and you get it
I
out,
do that all
you
the
focused
time.
on it,
I didn't
and
realize
then,
it was called something.
yeah, it's a great habit. A lot of people do parts of this without realizing it, and it's something I've been hearing a lot about lately. And it's just kind of this thing where you're just basically training yourself to be ready for the worst possible stuff to happen. So when it happens, it's not scary anymore, because you kind of already know the response, I guess. And you've given your brain that moment to say, it's okay, let's feel overwhelmed, let's think about what that experience would be like. And rather than being afraid, it kind of takes away some of the mysticism of the what if. It's like, well, no, I know exactly what if, and I know it's not great, and I don't want it to happen. But I know there's only so much that I can control in my life. And like it kind of, it simplifies things back to like a practical, what can I actually do with my life? And it makes you feel in control, because if you're in control, like if you're focusing on what you can do, you're immediately just thinking about what can I action in a certain situation, rather than that horrible feeling of just being overwhelmed and panicked and everything's out of my control and all that sort of stuff. So I think negative visualization is this really cool thing, and you've kind of described part of it there, where it's, you know, it's learning to embrace hardship and just deal with it, and it helps you down that road of not losing emotional control when you're in a hard position.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is also like it's practice, and that means that when things don't go perfectly, and even if you are somewhat like tilted or whatever, like you're not on your in form, or you're not really on your oh my god, I'm like blanking on the phrase, you're not feeling super good about things, you still get to learn something, because you get to try something, right? It's like playing a ladder game. When you are up against a strategy that you're struggling with, you get to try something, and if things don't go well, oftentimes it's not going to be the end of the world, and you can just try something different the next time, and you have some knowledge, you've gotten something from that loss. You didn't walk away completely just ruined and there's nothing left. Obviously, unless you do like unless your attempt at like diffusing the situation was like a racial slur on the broadcast, in which case, yeah, there might be some consequences there. But
woman, am I right? God, those bitches. Starcraft. The root of all my problems.
Hashtag the patriarchy.
Hashtag the patriarchy.
This is all good advice. I think Pigs was very like pointed. Like when things technically go wrong, that's probably the best thing you could do. And then we went really quite deep with it. But I personally don't really have a method. I just sit down and put my mask on as a Starcraft 2 caster, and I forget about it. So.
Well, I mean,
I don't know if it's compartmentalizing, but
that's kind of what I do. That's kind of what Pig does. You know.
Yeah.
You're like, this is a shitty thing, and I feel shitty, but I'm gonna put my game face on and get on with it, because you know, it's gotta get done. You know, if you're just like, all right, if you're just like, you know what, I'm out, then you're gonna hate yourself.
Yeah.
You know, when you start walking away, you're taking your tie off, and you're like, no, I'm not casting. I'm taking your suit off and walking back. I'm not casting him a bad day. And then by the time you get back to the hotel, you just like, oh, I'm just taking my tie off here. Calm down. No one's playing Tom Jones. You can leave your hat on. I'm just trying to paint a picture here. But you know, you hate yourself, because there's been a bunch of times where I've like, you know, in my life where I've gone to a class or something, and I've just been like, you know what, or I've gone to someone's to a class or to something that I like wasn't really feeling it. I'm like, you know what, I don't want to do this, and I leave. And then halfway through, I'm like, you think about it a bit more, you're like, oh god, I actually kind of regret that. You know, I wish I was more mature, or you know, or gave it more of a go. You know, something like that.
Of course. I think there's like what I used to do when I was really like upset about a test, when I was nervous, and then I was upset, is that I would just be like, you know what, it's done, right? Like I'd just be like, you know what, in a week, I won't even care about it. Things like are fine. I screwed up this time, but like things like are gonna change. That's what always got me through. But I never had to use it in StarCraft yet, and I'm hoping I never have to. But just thinking like this is crappy. People did call me out for it, but in a month, they won't even remember. Most of the time.
In a month, in like 2 days.
Or yeah, exactly.
You know, in this business, people's attention spans is tiny.
Yeah, and like you'll get another chance, and I guess for some people they're gonna be sitting here and be like, no, I got my one chance and it failed. And I'm like, well, you must have failed really hard if like your one chance was the reason you're not getting anything else. which I don't think has happened to anyone. Certainly not here, but I guess that's like confirmation bias or something like that. But anyways,
I mean, if I actually did get undressed on camera and start like, rubbing up on the leg of my co-caster or something like that, like me and Pig have another semi-cast. We have another semi-finals cast at BlizzCon. I actually get half naked. The camera cuts to me, and then I'm just like rubbing up and down on him and like, wiggling my butt against his hip. And I think I'll probably get fired and not hired again. Probably.
well, that is a.
But like in
it's
5 or 6 years, you could try again.
Yeah, but it's a solid
that'd be a
example
window.
though.
Yeah.
It's like not that like no one's ever done that, but like think of all the times
Yeah.
that you've heard of casters that have like disappeared. Think of all the casters that you know that disappeared and moved on other games, or were actually like even think of the ones that were heavily criticized by the community. How long did it take for them to stop getting jobs? I mean, someone brought up Mole Trap earlier on, and every single cast that guy did for like a year was heavily criticized.
That is
Yeah.
true.
So still wouldn't fire him.
I
before
think
Mole
that's
Traps was there,
because
I'm sorry,
they
buddy.
didn't have anyone else.
They just find whoever English speakers in Korea. They could have tried. But still, like it goes on to like think of
know.
how many people you just seen suddenly disappear. The one guy I can think of right now is Terry the intern. But you don't play around with racism on casts, so
Oh, okay. I couldn't
even-
remember who you were
even
talking about.
quote
Yeah.
unquote diet racism. I think I don't.
Oh,
just-
NASL,
Yeah.
right?
What?
yes, NASL. Oh, sorry.
I'm gonna
I know.
find this. Yeah.
Okay, so
Um,
NASL. So sorry. I thought, I should explain for everyone else in the chat as well. So Terry the intern goes up to the only guy who's black in the crowd when there's like downtime. The only guy sits next to him and says, actually, I forget exactly what he says. Maybe we can find the VOD, but it basically goes along the lines of like, so you're the only black guy here. What's that like? And of course, everyone was like, what the fuck? The guy played it off well, like, he was trying to just go along with it, but supposedly the official announcement was that he just was like his internship was done.
Sure.
But everyone kind of like that was coincidentally the last time you saw him on the broadcast.
Poor
so,
Terry.
Yeah.
He was a big proponent of wearing his dad's shirt on broadcast. As we
I
say.
can see that on your screen, man. Holy shit.
He said,
You
"How
could
does it
s- you
feel
could
to bring
sleep in
some
that."
diversity to the event?" Oh my god.
It's probably. I wonder if it's been removed. I don't know. Terry the
It
intern.
probably was.
I feel
racist,
bad, but I
racism
don't
or
really.
something.
That's
You know,
a
or
bad
think about
Or-
Idra. How long it took him to actually get fired? Anyways, it's just it's not as bad as you ever think, I guess. And this even goes to when you think something is going to be bad and maybe it is bad, and that obviously sucks. It's like there'll be tomorrow. There's the next day. Is next event.
Yeah, like
fine.
the world's not going to end just because you have you don't do your best or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think all the clips of it are gone. Yeah.
Rip.
I think so.
It's probably
Yeah.
for the best. I don't know, man. Is there anything else in particular that you guys want to ask each other?
We should probably
before
round
we
up, right?
wrap it
Yeah.
up?
If you guys
Yeah.
have any questions, shout them out. I feel like this has been awesome and comprehensive, and I just wanted to say that the point, I think it was ZombieGrub, you were saying about like having an interesting life, right? Makes you a better caster and a more interesting person.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
that one hit home for me as well. It's like so true. I had like no social life as a pro player. All I did was sit around and play Starcraft all day, and took a while of actually starting to socialize with humans again before I could like make any joke on broadcast, because I just wasn't. I had nothing I
Yeah,
did
there-
outside of care about Starcraft
Dude.
strategies. I was just so awkward.
There are people I've met that are streamers that you can tell that all they do is stream. As you meet them in person, and they're like really not quite there. Like they've not had experience talking to people face to face too much. Like maybe they just
Yeah.
order their food and they never leave their house. Like
I went through
I understand.
I was like, why can't I talk to humans? I used to be really good at talking to humans. I'm like, well, Jared, you spent 6 years just playing video games in your room. you probably should have gone outside at some point. I'm like, this is like a skill like any other. And apparently that social atrophy had muscle had atrophied. So yeah, that I'm like, yeah, it's been a journey getting back to learning how to speak to people in person again. But yeah, any questions you guys had, or anything you wanted to ask each other, or kind of you wanted to reiterate?
Does Graben have anything specific we didn't go over?
Not really. It has been amazing. You already answered all my questions, so
Oh.
that's great.
Awesome. Did you
Okay,
like how we
good
went
chat.
really deep and psychological towards the end there? Did you like that? Was that
Yeah,
very fun?
it's always a great thing to hear this kind of opinion from professional people like you.
Dude, this is
So-
what happens when we're at events together and we're like 4 whiskeys deep, 11 p.m. post broadcast, and we're in a hotel lobby somewhere. This is what happens, man.
And this is what I wanted to achieve. Just put all your four in the same room, the same chat room, and hear what you have to say.
Yeah, great idea, Graben. So thanks for organizing. This is Graben Time, guys, who is an up-and-coming commentator and person who is just fascinated to kind of hear a bit more out of all this. So, yeah, dude, I really enjoyed this. So thanks so much, guys, for all coming along and whatnot.
Thanks
my
for the
pleasure.
invite. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for
you.
having us.
Awesome. I guess we'll round up the VOD there. Awesome. Thanks for watching, everybody. Just a casual 2-hour roundtable discussion. I thought it'd be about an hour, but I mean, this was just a great discussion. So always a pleasure hanging out with you all. If any of you want to hang out, power up your streams, or maybe cast one of these DeepMind replays, I'm going to do some of that for a bit on the stream. I don't know if I'll get through all of them, but I'm going to try and cast some of the ones that weren't shown, so feel free to stick by. Thanks for watching, everyone on YouTube. Make sure you follow... what social media? We just do Twitch. We all stream. Feardragon, ZombieGrub, and Maynarde. And I believe everyone's Twitch handles are actually our names. We're not annoying people with 5 different URLs. So, yeah, check everyone out there on Twitter as well. And Ravi, you're back to using Twitter all the time now, so that's good. If you guys want to cringe and want to hurt yourself thinking about bad game design changes, definitely make sure you follow Ravi's Twitter, because that's an absolute nightmare to read every day.